All right, everybody, new merch. We got some art done by artist Thomas C. Rogers. You may have seen some of his collabs with Devils of Dirt Hawking. He has also done some extensive work with Harley Davidson. There's no AI done here on our merch. Of course, our thumbnails are always AI, but check it out on sportingchancepod.com. We got pullovers, zip-ups, long sleeves, t-shirts, and of course, stickers.
And this podcast is brought to you by Mountain State Falconry Supply. Freshen up your gear or get ready for the micro season. Visit mountainstatefalconrysupply.com.
And don't forget to get the tightest braided equipment on the market at midnightfalconry.com.
If you haven't put a deposit down on your next hunting partner, now's the time. Contact Seth Roy at northmountaingoshawks.com for your next season's hunting partner.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Sporting Chance podcast. Today, we are joined by special guests, Dan McCarron and Dave Stevens. Dan and Dave are both falconers. They're calling to us from Tennessee and North Carolina, respectively, but we're acquainted with each other back in Wyoming. Is that correct, guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
right.
It's and to call them falconers, I think, is a little bit of an understatement. I did the math, and and this is no disrespect, but it's worthy of mentioning. There's 110 years of falconry experience between these two gentlemen. There is, right?
You add us to it, and there's 125. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming on.
Yes.
And for those of you who are regular listeners, our episode series with Jeff Hershey, these guys were mentioned, and that's kind of what prompted this conversation to happen in the first place.
Yep.
All right. So we're just going to get right into it. Dan, we're going to start with you. Would you mind introducing yourself, telling the folks what you're all about, and then we'll move over to Dave with the same question.
Well, thanks for having me. I am a U.S. naturalized citizen. We moved over here from Canada when I was 12. My dad was an engineer, worked for a company outside of Buffalo, New York, and they sent our whole family over here. My dad had a job here and went through the naturalization process. And I became an American citizen my first year in college. Our whole family did. But when a company moves you back, it was in the 67. I was 12, and the company recruited my father, and immigration was very easy when a big company was, recruiting my father to come work he was an engineer for a television company. So that he was designing systems. And so it was a great move because it's the best thing we probably ever did, because it offered my sisters an opportunity probably to things we would never have had in Canada.
Like Dunkin' Donuts instead of Tim Hortons?
Tim Hortons, yeah.
And open carry and a little thing called freedom.
Well, even college, I don't know if we would have had the same opportunities to go to college back then in Canada.
Yeah.
But and then I went to a community college in Canandaigua, New York, and then I moved to Wyoming to go to the University of Wyoming in Laramie in 1978, spring of 78. And I lived there for almost 40 years, got a job, was trained as a wildlife biologist, did graduate work there, got a master's degree in biology there, working with rattlesnakes. And then one of my committee members was a science educator on my graduate committee, and his name was Alan McCormick, and he was the president of the National Association of Biology Teachers, and he was the editor of their journal. And he said, why don't you, what would you think about teaching science? I said, so I went and got my certification to teach, didn't have an education degree. And I wound up in Rock Springs student teaching, and they offered me a job the last day I student taught. And it was back then, Wyoming had one of the highest pay scales in the country. And Rock Springs was a place that nobody wanted to go to in Wyoming. It was in the Red Desert, and it was a mining town. But it was great because I was a falconer and I liked to fish. I fly fished and I hunted. And I was close to those types of resources, and it was great. And I went back to Laramie after I student taught. It was the spring of 1983. And I wrote my thesis. I locked myself in my office. I had a graduate assistantship. And I locked myself in my office for a month. I paid the secretary in the zoology department to type my thesis. Went fishing the morning of my defense because I was kind of burned out. They sent me for one revision. I came back, fixed it. The morning of my orals, I went up to the mountains in Medicine Bow between Cheyenne and Rock Springs and went fishing in some beaver ponds. Had a blast. Came back, had mud on my tennis shoes, walked into my committee, had my oral defense. It went well. And my committee took me to lunch at the faculty cafeteria. So that was a good sign.
That's good. Yeah, that's always a good start.
And I had some I had the head of the math department for the university was on my committee. So Al McCormick, a zoology professor, a geneticist, and a science educator. So I had 5 people on my committee. I started a doctor, but I didn't finish it. That's why you only need 3, but I kept my committee because everybody got along with each other. So I didn't want to, it was just politics. It was great. We all got along great. And they gave me a $500 a month stipend to go to school, and it was great. I didn't pay a dime to get my master's. It was awesome. It was great. I don't know if you could do that today.
Yeah,
I didn't pay a dime to get my master's either.
I am still paying for my master's degree.
But I jumped in doing lab work 2 weeks after I graduated with my undergrad. So it's like, I never stopped. So I don't know if I would have done it if I would have stopped. If I had a job, I don't know if I would have gone back. I'm glad I did it the way I did it, because school now, there's no way I'd go back to school. So it worked out. This is the way it worked. And then I've been in Rock Springs, and I started teaching in 1983, and I left in 2013. Taught 30 years to the day almost. Wow. I retired 30 feet from where I started teaching.
Wow.
Same school district. It's only, they were.
So you worked in the same school for 30 years?
Yeah, they were very, very good to me. I had in that big animal lab. I had snakes. I had a big anaconda I raised, and I had a big python. I used to bring all my birds in. And then people on the way to and from the NAFA meets on I-80 in Rock Springs would stop by, and I'd babysit their birds for them. So I'd have birds on screen perches in my classroom.
Oh, that's cool.
I'd have jeers, goshawks. All my eagles were there, my goshawk. And I had a pet bobcat for a while. Someone gave me, and it was pretty tame. And I used to bring it to school and turn it loose in my classroom. You should just walk around my classroom. You couldn't. And it was.
These days you can't have anything in the classroom.
You couldn't do that today.
No, unless you identify as the animal.
Yeah.
That's the only way to get into it.
So anyway, and then I started 1984. I started the Eagle thing, and we'll finish there, and we'll continue later, and we'll let Dave do his.
All right.
All right, Dave. Yes, thank you, Dan. Dave, you're up.
Well, I'm also happy to be here. Good seeing you, Dan.
Good seeing you, Dave.
I started as a child in North Carolina. We were a non-falconry state. I think the statute of limitations is probably safe with me now. They just didn't have a law. There was not a law in the book saying you couldn't. There just wasn't any kind of practice or procedure for the sport. At 19, I believe I was 19. I got driven up on by a police officer on some clay flats beside a Kmart, sitting beside my red tail and a cottontail, asking me way too many questions about what I was doing. And it kind of scared me. I was in college at the time at NC State, poli-sci major. So I had recently met a biochemist in the Research Triangle Park that was a native New Yorker, Abe Schwartz, who's no longer with us. But Abe was flying a lanner at pigeons. I used to catch for him in the state capitol. That was my entree to be able to be near another falconer. And I'd be his pigeon supplier just so I could watch that lanner fly. and I told Abe about my experience, and Abe created a letterhead and reached out to another person, Aaron, your sponsor, Bob Pendergast, in the west part of the state. I was in Raleigh at the time. And in 1979, we approached the state about creating falconry, and they advised us to go through the Fish and Wildlife Service, which we did. Fortunately for us at the time, Fish and Wildlife Service at our regional office in Atlanta was run by a wonderful guy named Tom Bennett. And Tom advised us, if you want to fast track this, just adopt the federal regs, and then we'll rubber stamp it here in Atlanta. If you decide to write your own regs, it's going to be month after month, year after year, and it'll be a cumbersome undertaking. And so my counsel to you is to adopt the federal regs, which we did. Fortunately for us, some biologists had talked the state into outlawing fox hunting. And the hunt seat crowd in North Carolina, which may not be very visible but is very powerful, wasn't hip on it, even though most of them were doctors and lawyers and congressmen. They weren't hip on it until it was too late and it was already enacted. So their sport went by the wayside for a year, and so they paid to have their own environmental studies. Meanwhile, the foxes in North Carolina exploded. I think at one time they said there was a den every 4 acres in the state. And so a year later, they moved to very quickly change the law about no fox hunting and to reestablish the season and whatnot. We were able to tack our falconry bill to what they were doing, since there was so much approval in Raleigh in the legislature to get that fox rewrite done. We literally carried the law from the House to the Senate to the governor's office in the period of 2 days, and got the law established. Abe got falconry license number 1. I got falconry license number 2, and Bob got falconry license number 3.
Wow.
And we were instantly flooded with a lot of apprentices in the early days. In the 80s, I must have been running a dozen apprentices at one time. It was a challenge, but we felt like to establish the sport in the state, we had to do whatever we had to do. And we did our best by all those apprentices. My family tree in the state's pretty big, and I'm really proud of most of them. Most of them are still hawking to this day. And but I wanted something much more. I was a state cop in North Carolina for a number of years, and then I got injured in the line of duty in '89 and went to work with my brother in a security company. The security company grew national. It was uniformed security officers in buildings and plants and hospitals and the like. And so when it grew out west, my brother said, "How'd you like to go be VP over the western part of what we're doing?" And having wanted to fly birds out west my whole life, I jumped at that and moved to the Panhandle of Oklahoma, which, for those of you who've never had the pleasure of flying Southwest Kansas and the Oklahoma Panhandle and the Panhandle of Texas, it's ground zero for just about every kind of raptor you'd ever want to fly, and the game was plentiful. And so for a North Carolina kid, they were turning me loose in a candy shop. It was amazing, and I got to fly just about every kind of bird I'd ever want to fly. I got to trap birds I'd never thought I'd get to trap. Danny schooled me on how to trap goshawks and eagles, and Danny and I met back in I guess it was the early 2000s, and Danny was patient with a North Carolina kid, teaching him how to catch goshawks on Commissary Ridge in Wyoming, because I eventually ended up moving to Wyoming near Dan. I was in Rollins. Dan was in Rock Springs teaching. And so we would trap Commissary Ridge, and then we got into, Dan had already been in the Eagles. I got into Eagles, and Dan was a great coach in that. And I flew the same Eagle for 18 years and really enjoyed that experience. I loved goshawks anyway. I loved the sipiters anyway. And so flying an Eagle's so similar to flying a goshawk. It's not funny, but I really enjoy the experience out there. And then I've now in older age that I'm retired, my wife and I got into the RV park business and sold our park in Wyoming, sold our other parks in other parts of the country. We ended up owning 5 and retired back home because I kind of went full circle and came back to North Carolina. So now it's Harris Hawks and Cooper's Hawks for me the rest of the way out, and trapping peregrines at the beach. So that's kind of how it's going to go.
That's awesome. Thank you for that, Dave.
Dave, did you by chance sponsor Bill Davis?
I did not want, he's in my family tree, but I didn't sponsor Bill directly. I loved him. Bill's one of my favorite people, and I'll never forget squirrel hawking in the swamp bottom one day with Bill's red tail and my Jack Russells. Steve Lehman got me into Jack Russells, and I had a couple of really good Russells at the time. Floyd Presley gave me a really good dog out of Maryland. And at any rate, we're running squirrels, and I turn around and Bill's nowhere to be found. And Bill suffered from diabetes. And I had to go back and find my buddy sitting at the bottom of a tree, a little on low sugar. So I had to learn how to carry Snickers bars with me when I hunted with Bill. But I love Bill fiercely, him and Carolyn both. And one of my closest friends who was also an apprentice sponsored him, and he has Bill's dog. Bill passed away a few years ago. So
I actually match made that because Bill's daughter got a hold of me when he passed away and said they needed to find a home for Max. So Max has been to the house here, and it's good because I kind of get to maintain a link to Bill through the dog. So John Mackins is a good friend of mine. And I didn't realize John sponsored Bill.
Actually, he was Bill Ahern's apprentice, but Bill was mine, I believe is how that worked out.
Yep, you've definitely made your mark on North Carolina Falconers, that's for sure.
That's a polite way of saying I'm an old fart, but that's okay.
All right. So you guys, it was this, the way this all came about was, and we have other things we want to talk about. There's a particular story that was printed in this On the Edge of the Wild by Stephen Bodio that we definitely want to discuss.
Yeah.
I told Casey a long time ago that I had read or heard this story, and I thought maybe it was a podcast or something, that someone had caught a Siberian goshawk in America, but I could not for the life of me remember where it was. And then we spoke to Jeff Hershey, and Jeff had told us who it was. And Casey had mentioned before, there's another guy who has an idea that there are nesting Siberian goshawks in Alaska, because it's really not a stretch to think that they could just come right over the ocean right there.
Yeah.
And nest. That's perfect. Seems like a perfect habitat for them as far as I know.
Yeah. It's more of a sea than an ocean, I think. Don't they call it the Bering Sea?
You can tell who doesn't have a master's degree here.
I think I'm right, though.
I mean, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Salt water.
I don't even need it. I don't even need
the body
it.
of salt water. It's not a stretch for them to fly across.
Aaron, I don't even need the master's degree. I'm all set.
The Bering Strait.
The Bering Strait, otherwise known as the Bering Sea, in between those two peninsulas.
Oh,
all right, Aaron?
God.
Get your
All right,
textbook.
guys.
I'm about to take
if you've ever read any of the old literature, it was years ago when I read it, but that used to freeze almost entirely from Russia over to to Alaska, right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's a very good possibility.
And there's some theories that tigers had crossed over into America at one time.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
Came back. Yeah. Because
Does it still freeze? Because I know a guy with a dog.
No, I
sled.
don't know. This is back might be during the ice, but I mean there could have been the big cave bears had come over apparently, but
wow.
and they're short faced bears.
Oh yeah, back then.
Grizzlies. Yeah.
Isn't the and this could be outdated at this point, but isn't the thought that humans walked across that and that's how they got into North America?
Yeah, that's one of the theories.
Yeah. That's what they think.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then they found that site in Alaska. What, Aaron? What?
Casey thinks God just transported them here.
No, they came here.
Casey thinks that God put humans in America 2,500 years ago.
Well, indirectly, I agree with him.
You're so
strange things in literature.
I think it's 3-1 in this one.
Yeah. Okay. Good. We'll convert him by the end of the podcast, Casey. Let's work on it.
I've been trying. No saving this guy.
I had the pleasure of trapping Adak Island with Don Hunley and a bunch of Alaskan falconers, trapping peels on the coast there on the Bering Sea. And the discussion one night in the place that we rented was about albitus. And those guys have really strong opinions about whether that bird's in Alaska or not. It might do you, if you really want to keep exploring it, get a hold of Don Hunley. You'll enjoy the experience. Don's a heck of a good guy. And be careful, Aaron, because he's a person of strong face. And once again, you'll be outnumbered. But Don and the guys, there was a really good group of Alaskan falconers at that group, and I really enjoyed listening to them talk about the white birds in Alaska. And so, if you want to explore it further, he'd be a good one to talk to.
I want to physically explore it further, like in a plane and boots on the ground.
Well, if you ever get a chance to trap Adak is an amazing experience. Obviously, it's ground zero for peels, and to be able to walk those beaches and see all those peels, iris, and to be on that barrier island. You're only 500 miles from Siberia, so Danny's right. They probably just walked across, but they were telling stories like albitus on boats that were coming across, that in heavy snowstorms they'd get on a boat and literally ride the boat to the mainland and to the barrier islands and the Aleutians. And just to get out of the weather, they ended up in mast of boats and stuff like that. And were brought across. So yeah, it would benefit you. But Danny is the only guy I ever know that did what he did in the lower 48 for sure.
Yeah. So let's
make that
perfect
happen.
Segue. Let's talk about that, if you don't mind, Dan.
Yep. So Dan.
Well, it's kind of a bittersweet subject to me because I never got to. It's sad, but I have a couple pictures of it, but I've never published them, and I'm not gonna. It's back. It was 19. I'm trying to think when it was. It was about 1987 or 1988. One of those 2 years.
Well, before anywhere.
The day before Christmas vacation in December.
Okay.
Excuse me.
And one more time, Dan, what year was that?
1986, 1987 or 1988. Winter.
And do you guys have any idea when they were first imported into America for falconry propagation?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, after that, Casey, what do you think?
I think it was after that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this was a wild bird. I mean, it was. Yeah. Anyway,
I'm wanting to eliminate that from the non-believers.
Well, and it had habits too, because I'll tell the rest of the story. I was teaching school. It was like, I can't remember. It was like the second day before Christmas vacation. So it was like a Thursday, and Friday would have been Christmas vacation. Or Friday would have been our last day of school. So Thursday night, I go home, and I get this call from the custodian of the Central Administration Building for our school district. and I knew, I can't remember his name. He said, Dan, this is so-and-so. Oh, hi, how are you? How you doing? Good. Hey, I know you're into birds. My wife and I are sitting here eating dinner, and it wasn't dark yet. So my wife and I are sitting in the kitchen, and there's this white bird sitting in the tree next to our bird feeder. And I got my field guy, and it's a white gar falcon. And I said, excuse me? It's a gar falcon. It's big. It's really big. I said, you mean gyr falcon? He said, yeah, Gyr, gyr falcon. He said, it's pure white and it's big. I said, don't move and don't go outside. I'll be right over. So I drive over across town. I knock on the door. I go in the back, and I go into the house. I go into their kitchen, and they, how you doing? And all the introductions, and they were really nice people. And I look through the kitchen window, and there's this big white raptor sitting in a tree, probably 40 feet away from our window. And I look, and it's got a really little head though. It didn't look like a gyr, but anyway, it moved. It did this, and it wagged its tail and had 12-inch tail feathers. I went, that's a goshawk. I'm going, that's a white goshawk.
Oh my gosh.
So I said, can I? And it's getting dark out. So it's roosting there. It's not going to go anywhere all night. I said, don't go outside. Don't mess with it. Don't let the dog out. Put the dog out in the front yard. You got to go let it go pee. Let it go up. Don't let the dog in the backyard. Go, okay, don't. So anyway, it was only about 10 feet off the ground. It was in like a little fruit tree. It was big, but just sitting about 10, 12 feet off the ground. It wasn't that. So anyway, I go home and I call my buddy up, and a couple falconers in town. I said, I need a pigeon. Can you lend me a pigeon? And yeah, sure. So he lends me one. He had some Barneys. So he gave me a Barney, and I get up there about 45 minutes before light the next morning. This is a Friday morning, and I have to teach in the morning. So I have to be at school about 8:15. So I called my principal and say, I might be a little late because I'm out in somebody's backyard trapping a hawk. Can you have somebody cover my class for a couple hours? And they go, yeah, no problem. Because when I said that I'm going to trap a hawk, they were so good to me. They let me do anything. So within reason,
for 30 years.
I didn't. Yeah, you're right. So Jack decided, it's only McCarron. He's going to call me and says, can I come in late because I'm trapping hawks? I said, oh, sure, Dan. Okay. So anyway, I get this big canvas tarp out of the shed, and I use their 2 garbage cans in their alley. And I put the garbage cans about 3 feet apart, and I threw the tarp over it, and me and the garbage cans are holding the tarp up. And I took my pocket knife and I cut a hole in the tarp, and I opened their gate about 2 feet, and I could see part of the goshawk, but I wanted to see line of sight. And I went and before I got light, I very carefully walked over there and put my bow net up. And Dave, it was my old bow net that was a half a bow net. Did you remember seeing that?
Oh yeah.
I staked the net to the ground, and I had the bow net. It was just this is my very first bow net. I actually trapped goshawks and redtails in it. It was a half a bow net. It was just a bow with an L welded out like this, and I had a couple of big rings welded to a stake, and I'd stake them in the ground, and I'd put those 2 prongs from the bow net through the holes, and I'd stake it to the ground, and it created a hinge, right? But it was only half a bow net rather. So I extended the net out about 3 feet past and made a square, staked it down with some slack, and I had it was very portable, and it was only about 3 feet across. And I set it up and propped it up like this. I only set it halfway, facing me, and with a stick. And I had my line coming down with an eye bolt, and I ran it all the way to the ground, back to my garbage can blind. And and I staked the pigeon with some very, very short jesses right in the middle of the bonelet. The jesses are like a couple, 3 inches long. And so every time I tried to stand up and fly, it'd fall over, which is really great because it went, I'm messed up. Come kill me and eat me. So anyway, so everything's set. The sun hasn't come up yet, but it's coming up. And it's getting lighter and lighter and lighter. And the pigeon starts getting active. And it starts doing this, doing and falling over and standing back up. And I see the goshawk craning its neck because it's cold out. It's really cold. It's probably in the 20s, maybe mid 20s. So that bird's empty. Probably it's been, I never saw it cast, but it was a cold night. And it starts craning its head. And I said, you gotta mute. Once you mute, when a bird mutes, huh, Dave? You've seen eagles, you've seen goshawk. Well, when they mute, they're like red tails, when they mute, they make a commitment. So anyway, I said, you come on, you gotta slice. So it's crane. I could see it crane its head, and the pigeon's getting pretty active now. And I'll bet you it's only 50 feet away from the goshawk, other side of the yard. So I've got this line of sight. I get the pigeon here, goshawk's over here, and I'm back here. So I'm watching from my right to my left. So I got a perfect front row seat, right? So I got everything's ready, and goshawk mutes. And then all of a sudden I just blinked. I don't remember. And I look, and the goshawk's off. It's going, and I look, and it's on the pigeon. It's like, it's there. I didn't even see it go down. I just go, I breathed, and I looked away for a second, which I probably shouldn't have, but I don't know what it was. But I looked and went, oh no, it's sitting on top of the pigeon. So it's sitting there, and it's got its back to me. It's facing the back of the bonelet, which is perfect. It's facing so it kind of turns to the side a little bit, and it's just sitting on it. Pigeon's toast not even moving. I mean, it just palmed that pigeon and footed it and bound to it. Anyway, we're just letting it calm down a little bit, and it's looking around, and it plucked once, and then it put its head down again, and bam, I had it. I get over there, I walk over there, and I grab it, pull it out, and I got this white goshawk. It's got lemon yellow eyes. I mean, fluorescent yellow eyes. I mean, I've never seen eyes that are so fluorescent yellow. I mean, they're just like they were lit up like Christmas tree ornaments. And it didn't cack or anything. It was a female. I think it was a female. I can't remember even how much it weighed. Anyway, okay, so I bound it. I put it in an abba. I taped its feet up. And by this time, I went home real quick. I had to do something. I brought the bird. I took it to school with me. Had it on my front seat of my truck. Put a hood on it. I had a hood. And I went to school. And back then, you needed a license, which is easy to get from the Game and Fish. You needed a license to capture hawks for falconry purposes. It was a $10 permit for residents. And I didn't have one. And I wasn't expecting on trapping one. I didn't have a bird then. I had a Fruginous hawk that I released that fall. Like in October, November, I only flew it for a couple months. I turned it loose. So technically, I didn't have a permit for it to keep it. And this is in 1988. This is like 4 or 5 years after Operation Falcon. The guy that was Denver was a very important part of the Operation Falcon scenery as far as law enforcement and the I don't know what you'd call it, Dave. They were very involved in setting up and synchronizing the Operation Falcon's setup, right?
Absolutely.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I took it to school, and I knew what it was, but at that time I never had a passage goshawk before, so I wasn't set up for it, and I did not want to mess this thing up, so I turned it loose. I just turned it loose. Then, about 3 days later, a friend called me and said, this is over Christmas vacation, said, hey, there's this white bird hanging around the college. It's a big hawk. I went, what? So, and it's only about 7, 8 blocks away. That bird went up on a small hill, a little mountainous area hill where the college is in town. And there's some trees and there's a lot of sagebrush. There's huge, it's sitting on about 40, 50 acres. It's kind of remote and it's very secretive and not too much disturbance. And that thing was hanging out at that park area. And it was all it had to go was down the street about 3 or 4 blocks, kill a pigeon, come back up because there's city pigeons down below. That's what I was guessing. It hung out there. So I went up there and I saw it sitting on the sidebar of a telephone pole. And I sat there and watched it it was about 2 hours before dark. I sat there and watched it because I wanted to know where it was going to go roost. And it came down off that telephone pole and disappeared into some taller sagebrush between the college and this road I was on. Skyline Road, it was called. And it never came back up again. It wasn't on any game. I think it was roosting on the ground, which tells me that's not normal North American goshawk behavior. Especially, it would have been uncomfortable being out in the open like that. North American goshawks don't do that. I've seen them come through the desert before, but I've never seen them roosting on the ground. I've seen deer sitting on the ground. I've seen wild deer falcons in Wyoming sitting on the ground, too. But
so they would intentionally, like wild deers will intentionally roost like on the ground just because. Well,
you know what? Have you ever been out west? Have you ever seen the anthills that are out there?
Recently, he went to Ohio. That's the West as far as Casey's concerned.
You've seen Dave, you know those
California all the time.
Those anthills are sort of raised a little bit, Dave. You know what I mean, right?
Absolutely.
Well, Paul and I were out coyote hunting one winter, and we thought we saw a rough-legged duck sitting on an anthill, and we got closer and closer and closer, and we said, "That's not a rough-leg," and it was a female deer falcon sitting on top of the anthill, and the sand in an anthill doesn't freeze. It's kind of it's still granular, and it's a big old it's a trapper's trick, or they like gathering anthill sand for their traps.
Oh, that's clever.
So they can sift it over their traps because it won't freeze in the wintertime. And the best way to collect sand pebbles in the wintertime, if you're a fur trapper, is go look for anthills and collect some of the sand that's on the top. And there's these little mounds. Well, this bird was sitting right on top of the mound. We got pretty close to it before it bumped. And it was a female deer falcon. So anyway, this bird had stayed there. Went back the next day. It was on the same telephone again. So I just I apply for a permit to get a bird, to get a license, right? Mm-hmm. So 2 or 3 days come by, and it took about 4 or 5 days, and I got my permit. So I have a permit in my pocket to keep it. And I saw it, and then it disappeared for a while. It was gone for about a week or two. And I could never find it again. I saw it for 2 or 3 days in a row, and then it disappeared. But before it disappeared, there was a professor at the college. There was a community college that was a verifier for North American birds. He was a bird watcher, and he had told me that there were some reports of this big front that had moved through the day or two before I had trapped it the first time, called the Siberian Express. And there were some Siberian Asian warblers or some type of passerine in the park 15 miles to the west of us in Green River. And people were flying in from all over the country to see these birds that have them on their life list. And I can't remember this gentleman's name. He was a great guy. But I told him about this white goshawk. He went and saw it, and he found it. And he said, Dan, that is a white goshawk. I said, yeah, it's not albino. It's not leucistic. It had black talons, yellow cere, dark beak, yellow eyes. It was not an albino. It was a color phase of some type. And I thought it was an albitus. So anyway, a couple of weeks went by, and I got a call. This is probably 3 weeks after when I first trapped it. I get a call from someone that found a hawk in the park, and it was weak, and they put it in a box and they could bring it over to me. And I said, yeah, bring it over. It's a white bird. It was the goshawk. They found it was too weak. It was sick. It had frownce, and it was so weak. Its keel was it hadn't eaten in a long time. And I saw the ulcers in its throat. It had holes in the back of its throat from the cankers.
Oof.
And I had it that night. It stood up. I gave it some water, and it drank water, and it stood up, and it kept sitting back down again. And around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, it died in my arms. It just died.
Oh.
So I put it in the freezer, and I called a couple people. I called the P Fund and told them what had happened, because I got a call from Tom Cade about a week later asking me what happened. And I said, and I called the Smithsonian, the National Museum, and I asked them if they'd be interested in this, and I'll ship it to them. They said, absolutely. I said, I think I know what this thing is. It's wild. It was a wild bird. It's white. It's a goshawk. I think it's a Accipiter gentilis is albitus. Is it a gentilis albitus? It is, albitus.
Yes.
Subspecies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, they say it's their own species now, but yeah.
Okay, I can't remember. Yeah, taxonomy is kind of. Anyway, they said yes. So I froze it, packed it in dry ice, and shipped it next day, FedExed it to the National Museum in Washington, D.C., and they made a study skin out of it, and it's still there. But their tag on it is North American goshawk with dilute plumage. And I asked the guy, I said, what is dilute plumage? But he wasn't a falconer. And I said, they said there were some birds from Russia found in a park 15 miles from here. And there were birders from all over the country flogging to come see these little passerines. And, people are flying from all over the country. I guess there's some pretty serious bird watchers.
Yeah.
And this is too much of a coincidence,
Yeah. Yeah.
They probably just came right down off straight and blew right then. Blew down. I'm surprised those little birds made it. But anyway, that's it. And
wow.
I never, if I knew, if I would have had the experience, I probably, it didn't act sick when I trapped it, but I didn't really examine it that much,
Yeah. You're a better man than me. I would have been all over that bird. I would have never let it go.
Yeah. Well,
there's no way. But yeah, I know. Right after
that would have
Project
attracted
Falcon,
so much attention. I had to do and anyway, it wasn't a big decision for me. I mean, I know, and I.
No, you did the right thing, like the right thing.
Yeah,
especially it's hard. It's
me?
hard for us, Casey, and Casey's not up in arms about it, like I would think he would be. But it's no, we're so far removed from Operation Falcon that we can't appreciate now what you guys must have felt like back then.
Yeah,
you guys were shook, as we say.
Not one house was knocked on in Wyoming, though. Not one falconer's residence was visited during Operation Falcon. So
wow.
that's there's a lot
sure
of falconers
was.
in Wyoming. You were?
And I want to
I
hear about that.
I was when I got out of NC State, there was no work, It was 1980. Carter was going out. Reagan was coming in. There was long gas lines. There were guys with master's degrees working at Roscoe Griffin selling shoes. I mean, it was not a good time in the country. And I went down to the recruiter to see if I could go into OCS in the Air Force. And they had closed the officers candidate school because they were overmanned with the officer ranks in the Air Force. The billets were all full. So they said, well, we'll give you E3 and your pick of career field and your pick of base. And I said, well, this is my chance to get out west. So I chose Denver and ended up at Lowry Air Force Base in Denver. And the name will remain anonymous, I guess, unless you guys want to discuss him. If you can believe it, Dan, he called me last year and asked me to try to rewrite history to make him look more flattering so NAFA would let him back in. And I told him I really appreciate it, but I'm not the guy to do this for you, which goes against my faith. But I was a 21-year-old kid from North Carolina whose life dream was to fly a goshawk. I'd read every German book, every European book about goshawks. I'd read Beebe Webster's 4 billion times, a chapter on the North American gosh. I wanted one terribly, and I got a call at the house one night. I was flying a red tail, and I'd gotten my Colorado falconry license, and I was flying a red tail, and I got a call that there was a free goshawk available, and all I had to do was come get it. And man, I really thought about it hard too. And he was really convincing on the phone. And I told him, no, I just can't do this. And a week passed and he called again. And then I told him, if you call me again, I'm going to call the government on you. Because I was really uncomfortable. I was a cop at the Air Force Base. So, going that far out of line was something I wasn't comfortable with doing. And plus there was a diner that the local Denver falconry community ate at all the time because I got them permission to hawk an Air National Guard base, on 6th Avenue out in Aurora. And, we used to meet at the Village Inn Pizza Parlor, and they literally saved and reserved a half-round booth for us in the back. The falconers were there all day, late into the night. You never knew who you were going to see when you got in there. It was Rick Cole and Ken Kitawa and Lenny Gouldman and a bunch of people, my sponsor and a bunch of people. And at any rate, they were telling stories at the table of late night intrusions into their mews where their alarms would go off at 2:00 in the morning and their prairies and their peregrines would scream and people had been in their backyard and they were comparing notes and everybody was getting hit. So it became really clear to us that something was up. And sure enough, a year later, when they made those few meager arrests after spending all the money they spent, it was quite an embarrassment, the Fish and Wildlife Service. But yeah, you're right to make that analogy, Aaron, because Dan and I came up in a generation not trusting or appreciating the Fish and Wildlife Service. They harassed us. They over-legislated us. We're by far and away the most over-legislated sport, most over-regulated, over-controlled. It's pitiful. And Dan's going to talk a lot tonight about his efforts in Eagles, but I mean, they have just pounded us for decades. And we didn't have the money that Ducks Unlimited and Bass and organizations like that had to back them down in court. So we just had to deal with them. And but yeah, I remember those days vividly.
Yeah, it's scary. And yeah, I mean, we discussed doing a series on that whole, on the Project Falcon and how it came about. The one gentleman that kind of was behind the whole thing. But we were advised that maybe it's not the best idea.
Discouraged.
we were discouraged.
Danny, do you know anything about his neighbors across the street? Did you ever hear that story?
No, but hold that thought. He offered me birds too.
Did he?
Yeah, a year after Operation Falcon.
Good gosh.
Me and Casey would have taken those
That's another
birds.
story. That's another story because the feds made me send him an eagle I had.
Really?
Oh, yeah, you know that story, right?
Me? You're asking me? I don't know this story.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Dave Stevens. Yeah. Anyway, so go ahead. No, what about his neighbor?
He told me it was last year or the year before. It's been longer than that. It's probably 3 or 4 years now. That a man and his wife across the street were murdered in their bed, and that the assassin got the wrong house. He was a well-loved dentist in town, and so it really stumped the authorities because they couldn't find why anybody would have a motive to kill him. And clearly, he believes that they were sent to kill him. That was part of the sob story about me lobbying NAFA to get him back in, and to say he was pressured as a young man because he was busted in an airport with birds, and so they leveraged him and leaned on him and yada 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 yada. But he swears that a dentist and his wife across the street were shot and killed in their bed, and it was because the shooter got the wrong address. So this story is really, really, really tangled, and yeah, I don't know what you guys can do from a liability standpoint as a podcast, whether you would even want to walk down that road. But
we don't want NAFA's pit team after us either.
Yeah,
so
right. But
that ship has sailed, and guys like Will Shore. Remember Will Shore? He did a wonderful, wonderful study on that and a write up on it. But that ship has already sailed, and it's really not. Most of those people that were involved with Operation Falcon are either dead or retired. And I talked to a guy yesterday that gentleman we're talking about in Montana. He came to Wyoming and he drew a permit a few years ago. And I guess he can barely get in and out of a car. So I don't know I don't know. But as far as I know, everybody's getting old. And that guy, when did this conversation between you and him happen, Dave?
I caught some heat, Danny, because I placed an eagle for him. He was in possession of an eagle. And there was a young eagle falconer in the panhandle of Texas that I cared a lot about. He wanted a bird really bad, and I thought a lot of him. And I said, well, look, there are more ways than trapping to get an eagle. I'll keep my ear to the ground. And you know who called me about making his name right? And I said, and in the course of the conversation, he said, you're an eagle falconer, aren't you? And I said, yeah, I am. And he said, how would you like an eagle? And I'm right off the bat, my mind flashes back to being 20, the last time this guy offered me a bird. And I said, is it a legal bird? And he goes, oh, yeah, it's very legal. I've had her for years, and it's unfair that I have it and it's not being flown. It's basically pet keeping, and I'd like to find a home for the bird. And I said, well, let me find out if my buddy's interested. So I called him, and he was like, yeah. And I said, well, listen, you're making a deal with a person that a lot of people find in contempt. So before you decide to accept this, understand that it's going to come with a price, and as far as infamy is concerned, and if it comes from him, it might even come with a more literal price. In other words, do something for me kind of thing. So he said, no, I can handle it. So he called him and went up there and got the bird, and he flew the bird for a number of years, and then he passed it on to another falconer. But that's how he and I got reconnected. He called to get that's all right. I called him over the bird, and then he tried to connect me getting him back into NAFA with the transfer of the bird. There's always some hidden agenda there. So, but we certainly didn't make any kind of, allowance to NAFA or any kind of entree to NAFA on his behalf. We wouldn't ever do anything like that. We just let that lie, and he let it lie too. He let it go. After he figured out we weren't going to help him, he still wanted out from under the bird, so the guy got the bird.
Okay. Yeah. All
Interesting.
Right. Yeah. It's just, it's just a topic that would be interesting, especially for the newer generation of falconers that are not really aware of what went on or just know the bullet points of the whole situation. But it is a pretty insane situation how that all went down, and the coordination between, I believe it was the entire United States and Canada were involved, law enforcement, and they hit falconers' houses all at the exact same time in the entire country and Canada. And I think there was only like a handful of crimes that were actually committed. And it was just 5 or 6 people, and not even that were arrested. And it wasn't even related to what they were raiding about. They had this whole agenda that we were all smugglers and this and that. And then when they raided everybody's house, they would just find an extra bird or something, or too much head in their freezer. It was all a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah. For those of you out there listening who are not exactly sure what we're talking about, it is detailed in a book called The Pilgrim and the Cowboy. Highly encourage you guys to read it. All right. Interesting stuff. And that's, Dan, did you have something else to add about that?
There is a pretty good NAFA archive going over all aspects of Operation Falcon that Will Shore wrote in old past Hawkshaws. And he did a wonderful historical documentation of Operation Falcon. Okay. And it's very accurate. There's lots of literature out there on it. So, but I would, I don't know if I'd want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. And it was 40 years ago.
Yeah. So the accusation, I guess, was that there was a large scale illegal commercial trade of wild birds of prey amongst falconers.
That's correct.
Yeah. Which any falconer knows, you do not pay anything for a wild bird. That is a no-go. Be very careful with accepting a bird from another falconer, even if you believe it's a illegal transfer.
Well, it went a little bit further too. They were suspicious that people were getting wild birds, downy birds, and putting seamless bands on them, and saying they bred them.
Right.
It was multifaceted, but you got most of it. So
okay.
All right. So we jump from the white goshawk to that. You guys both have history flying goshawks and trapping goshawks. Dave, you had told Casey that you'd shared some stories about trapping wild goshawks in Wyoming.
Yeah, you should start with Dan in this because Dan was my mentor in this. But I learned about a ridge in Wyoming when I lived there. That actually before I lived there, when I still lived in the Oklahoma Panhandle, that was tremendous for trapping passage birds. There was a group of Oklahomans that would go every year to Medicine Bow and take eyases. And the Medicine Bow area that Dan was talking about earlier, and they kept ragging me to go, but I wasn't an eyas guy. I wasn't an imprint falconer. I was a passage guy, and I wanted to trap passage birds. So I found out somebody that shared my love of it and got a hold of Danny, and Danny was really gracious about it and schooled me really on how to do it. So my company, I probably shouldn't admit this, but my oldest brother and president of the company's passed, so I could probably get away with it. But we opened the Salt Lake City office in our company, and it was pretty close to commissary. So Rose, my wife, and I spent a summer on commissary building a blind, and Hawkwatch International was up there, and we literally excavated the stone out of the ground on a ridge and built a stone blind, and pine beetles had infected the area, so we had a lot of lodgepole pine for the roof, and we were about a mile or two up the ridge north of Danny, where Danny routinely trapped. So it was something that Rose and I and Dan could do together. Danny would hit his blind, and we'd hit our blind, and I got addicted. I mean, some people it's crack, and other people it's Bassett's goshawks. I could do it every day, all day. And trust me, Danny could too. So it's when I gained a lot of respect for Danny and his skill at trapping a goshawk, and his ability to know what to do with them once he trapped them, because passage birds are, require knowledge to be able to handle correctly and not stressing them into asper and whatnot. So having Danny as a resource was invaluable, but we built a heck of a blind, still there today if you guys would like to use it. It stood, listen to Casey, it stood the test of time. I had an apprentice from Rock Springs go up and check on it here not too long ago, and he said, Dave, it's like the day you build it. But to trap, to bring passage goshawks out of fall migration into a lure pole and bow net is one of the most exciting things you'll ever do. And I'm currently trapping peregrines on the beach here in North Carolina, and it's a lot of fun using the same setup, Danny's very same lure pole setup. But boy, I'll tell you, passage goshawks, and being in passive migration period, because you never know what's coming in. I mean, 1 minute it's a red tail, 1 minute it's coops, 1 minute it's a Sharpie. Then you get a golden eagle pass by and come in. And I mean, you never know what's coming. Peregrines, anatoms out of Yellowstone coming in. It's really an amazing place to be during an amazing time of the year in Wyoming. But trapping passage goshawks is special. And if your listeners
what's stopping
are
you from doing it now? What's stopping you from flying one now?
Well, it is for me, having done it as long as I did it. I think in your life in falconry, at least for me, I felt like it was quite a blessing to be able to share your life with these birds to start with. So I was really grateful that our God would allow us such a wonderful sport in the outdoors. And I wanted to get as much of it as I could. I didn't want to spend my life with one species. I wanted to try to grab as much of it as I could, just because I knew every species was going to be different. And when you're around people like Danny and the falconers that I was blessed to grow up with in Colorado and whatnot, you hear them talk about the species with such regard and how different they are. You want to experience that yourself. And I've done the passage goshawk thing. I think probably for me, my next bird will be a chamber raised albitus or something like that to retire with. But don't get me wrong, I'm a goshawker. I mean, Danny lit a fire in me that, boy, I'll tell you, still burns today. If you're truly an accipiter guy, if you're truly an Austringer, and I love flying falcons, but if you're truly an Austringer, I mean, it doesn't get any better than goshawks and golden eagles. It's just stud. That's just my opinion.
So I lost 2 goshawks pretty close to each other. So all last season I didn't fly a goshawk. I have a red tail that I'm interviewing. And I looked at Casey at a certain point when we were hunting together this year, and I was like, I feel so left out not having a goshawk and seeing everybody else's. It's just, it bites you and it doesn't let go if you're that type of person.
Yeah.
It really does. It does.
It's like drugs. It is like a drug. You said some people it's crack, some people it's goshawks, and it's like they might as well be the same thing.
Yeah, might as well. Might as well.
You just can't stop doing it. Yeah, you can't stop. I don't do the the other one, but I could imagine what it would feel like to be addicted to crack.
Must be pretty awesome.
It sounds awesome, then.
So
Man.
You don't prescribe to the idea that, and Dan, you live in the Southeast now as well. You don't prescribe to the idea that those passage goshawks won't thrive in the southeastern climate.
That's a great question. I basically come to the conclusion that I can't duplicate the falconry that I spent almost 45 years doing with goshawks. I flew frugianous hawks for 7-8 years, then goshawks, and then I got a hold of eagles when they became available, and then back to goshawks, and then another eagle. I've 4 or 5 eagles over the years. I've given 3 or 4 eagles away. I've released 3 or 4. I had one die of asper, and one was electrocuted. And then I moved to Kansas. We thought our kids were going to move towards Kansas for jobs, and we bought a little farm outside of Hutchinson. And I set up we had some land, and I set up a pigeon loft, and within 2 years, I had put up multiple buildings, and I just worked around the clock. I had lights out at night building stuff. I was just motivated. I always wanted to keep homers, and I built a big muse. I was going to get an eagle, but then I wound up not using it for that. And I started trapping prairie falcons and training prairie falcons. And I've always loved prairie falcons. I'd see them in Wyoming, but I've heard people used to retire and quit falconry because of passage prairie falcons. But I got along with them. I really liked them. I had 2 really good mentors that told me how to take care of prairies when you trap them. Just leave them alone, put a hood on them, put them on a low perch in the corner of your room in your basement somewhere, and don't touch them for 3 or 4 days. Let them empty out. Just let them empty out. And I came up with a way to trap starlings. I came up with this trapping method. It was a pedam setup on steroids to trap golden eagles. It was pretty successful. And I figured if I'm going to get into trapping prairie falcons, I'd need to, you got to have bait. And I never really a lot of sparrows around me. They're in town, but I couldn't supervise their traps. You got to leave them in there for long periods of time. But I did an experiment. I was driving down the street in downtown Hutch, or on the side street, around some homes. And there's a couple hundred starlings sitting on wires. And I had some Cheetos with me. And I rolled my window down. I crushed them over my hand. And I was throwing Cheetos out my side of my window. I'm looking at rear view mirror. And these starlings are just falling like snow on the ground, eating these Cheetos. And I went, and this light went off my head and went, oh, wow. I know I can get all the starlings I want, So, I mean, it was that quick. And I built this little trap. It's 30 inches by 12 foot high by about 16 inches wide, with an open door on both sides with hinged closures, but with a funnel opening, but wide open. I mean, and I put Cheetos in it and put the doors open, and had little rubber band hooks on them so I could close them, but I'd leave them wide open, and I'd stick them out there, and they're used to people in town, and they'd come down. And my record, I caught 38 starlings in under 10 minutes. They were just, once one get in there, they get so greedy, and they start climbing on each other, and then can you picture this? It was like, it's only 30. It was like a shoebox. There was 38 starlings in that trap until I run up to it, and a few of them get out, but I shut the doors. And I had my supply of starlings. And I did that year after year, several hundred starlings over the years. And I'd give them to people. They'd stop through town. Once I found out about it, people be on back and forth from NAFA meets and stuff. Hey, can I have a few starlings? I'd give them a dozen starlings. I'd always keep 15 or 20 of them alive, and I figured out how to keep them long term. And the ones at the end.
How do you do that? How do you keep them alive? Because I've heard they're hard to keep alive also.
Mine thrived. I had a cage that's about 3 feet long by about 2 feet wide and maybe 18 inches high. And I put a roost bars, wood dowels on one side with a tarp over it. And I put a door just big enough to put my arm through there because they can get out pretty quick. And I'd put food, water. I'd have to water them and food. And I'd get chick starter, laying, chick starter.
Okay.
And I'd mix that with some dry kibbles, cat food, dry kibbles, cat food.
Okay.
And I'd wet it and I'd squish it with a fork and get it all mixed up, and they'd thrive on it. And at the end of the season, when I interviewed a couple of pasture prairies, I'd always have 5 or 10 left. And I'd keep them for about a week before I'd use them for food, because sometimes if they were poisoned, they would have died. I figure if they live for 7 days, they're okay. I kept them and they keep them for hawk food. And when I killed them and butchered them and put them in the freezer, they had fat on them. There was white fat on their breast. I mean, they were due fried. I always had a few die in the beginning, but I don't know what they died from. Maybe poisoning, maybe stress, but I could always keep a couple dozen, at least 20, 24 of them alive all the time. Because if I needed them, there could be a white goshawk showing up someday, and I have bait, so, but I could trap prairies an hour from my house, hour and a half from my house. And it was a ball. I went up trapping just for fun, maybe 25 or 30 prairie falcons in my life, and this little fly trapping. And anyway, that was probably a rabbit trail. What was the
That was
original?
good. That was
good stuff. But my question was, do you guys think that a passage goshawk can survive the southeastern climate?
Oh, I guess I know people have flying goshawks here. I'd be afraid of the quarry too. Now, if I had nothing but rabbits to fly them on in Rock Springs, and when the rabbits were up, I had a blast. In the wintertime, I was hawking on snowshoes a lot of times, hawking winter cottontails with a passage trained goshawk all muscled up off the fist. When you're the tallest thing for in any direction for 30 miles, the sagebrush, you're squishing on snow, and you see these cottontails running out way in front of you. And those birds are taking these country long slips. And I put tail bells on my goshawks, and they're just weaving in and out of the sagebrush. You're just going like this, like they come up, bam, and they're catching rabbits 100 yards out. I mean, it's awesome. They see them, and they're already in shape because they only trapped them 5 weeks earlier. They haven't really gotten out of shape. And I don't know. I couldn't duplicate that. I think there's health issues here. It gets super, super hot, and I don't have the opportunities. It's like I'm in the rainforest. I'm on a different planet here. Dave, you know what I'm talking about. Sweetwater County. Yeah, I mean, I'd probably lose it. And I would, to be honest, I know guys fly squirrels with goshawks, but those feet, I don't know. I would matter sooner or later a squirrel could really injure a goshawk, but I'm not sure about that. I don't know. I wouldn't do it. Cottontails, a passage goshawk in this environment would be asking for trouble because of the health issues, I think, too. But also the quarry. I don't know. Gray squirrels aren't that. I don't know how formidable they are as quarry. I really have no interest hunting them, so I don't want to hunt them with a red tail.
Dan, have you ever hunted squirrels with a goshawk? Have you ever seen it or been part of a hunt?
Have I?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Well, that's why that
I've
explains
seen
that.
films of it. No, but I understand. But you understand. I've already killed hundreds and hundreds of cottontails. I mean, I did it. I liked it. I saw it, and I hawked birds off the fist.
Yeah.
And if they missed, they just came right back to me like a yo-yo because I'm the tallest thing out there. If they landed on the sagebrush, all I have to do is Dave and we were together hawking. What was the name of that bird that you lent me?
Wendy.
Wendy?
Yeah.
She just come right back to the fist. I mean, it's like,
I guess, when you go from that to like sweating and bleeding and running through the briars, it doesn't even appeal to you. Yeah.
I fly fish, and I'm a serious fly fisher, and I have fly fish all over the country. And I've tooled up. I used to build fly rods. I don't build them anymore. I haven't built a rod in over 20 years, but I'm going to start chasing trophy bass with a fishing kayak. I have a really nice fishing kayak I bought a couple of years ago, and I'm gonna chase bass on a fly rod, largemouth here. Well, Chickamauga Lake is one of the best bass fishing fisheries in the country. Top rate, multi-million-dollar bass tournaments here from all over the country. I mean, it's you heard of Chickamauga?
Yeah.
No, but I know they go to these specific places for those tournaments. Yeah.
Yeah, Chickamauga is 20 minutes from my house. So So I've caught some nice bass already. Nothing huge, but I'm learning. And I don't have to feed my fly rods. And they're 4-piece rods. I can put my waders, I can take 1,000 flies, 2 or 3 fly rods, couple reels, my waders, my net, everything in one bag, pay an extra $25, $40 on the plane, and go anywhere in the country I want, unpack it, or I can throw it in the shed for a year and not look at it. And I don't have to feed it. And I never intermewed any of my passage goshawks. I only, it was 3 of them, but I never, and I had 3 imprints. I had 2 really good imprints, and another one I gave to a friend, and it turned out to be really good. But I turned all my passage birds loose. I turned them loose in April. I didn't want to feed them all summer, and they're dirty. I mean, they're great birds, but dirty. My goodness gracious,
they're dirty.
I mean, I loved them. I loved them, and I take really good care of my birds. I take very, very good care of my birds. I take them very seriously, but I didn't want to, we can't go anywhere. And my wife has put up with this for so long, and now I can, and she's encouraging me to fly fish because I don't have to feed them.
That's her plan. That was her plan all along.
That's okay. Yeah, that's okay. But I can live vicariously through you guys. I mean, I can. I had a great run. I had a passage female prairie falcon that I caught a ton of ducks with, and I loved it. And I wish I would have started it 20, 30 years earlier. But you can't do it all.
It's not over. Whatever. It's not over.
You're making me sad, Dan. I think you need a nice big fin bird, and you gotta open up your horizon on some squirrels. It's so fun. You'll have a blast.
And to answer your question, getting back to the original question, I believe that the stress that the southern climate puts on birds is unreasonable to ask a North American wild bird to go through. That's just my opinion.
What do you think about it? What do you think about an imprint?
So this is what I did. I lived in Morehead City. Aaron, you know this area. I lived at the beach. I lived in Morehead City.
Right.
And so I'm going through withdrawal being back east, okay, for goshawks. So I called
basically a swamp.
I called a friend of mine in Iowa, and Lance Christensen, and I said, Lance, what about these captive red birds that you've been breeding forever, you and Vic Hardiswick? And by the way, back to Dan's Alvidus point, Dan trapped that bird before Vic started breeding Russian birds in the U.S.
Okay.
So if you want to get the chronology right, it was Vic first, and then it was Lance Christensen. And Vic, when Vic passed, Vic's widow gave Vic's project to Lance. But the chronology of that was behind Dan trapping that bird in Wyoming. So
Yeah.
just to give you a point of basis on that. But Lance said, Dave, come get you a finished female. I'll make you a great deal on it. And she'll be resistant because she's chamber raised. She won't be under the stress of what you're used to with passage goshawks. And it'll be like flying a real fast red tail, and you'll have a blast. And
I agree.
I was literally at the beach, and I'm not going to discuss how we hunted, but I had more fun than should be allowed. Saw some of the greatest flying, and this is now the East Coast. Okay, saw some of the greatest flying you could ever see. Those birds, because they're so calm, and Asper's not a concern, I kept her inside, but I slightly air conditioned the room, but it wasn't like it was 60 degrees. It was like in a 98 degree, 95% humidity Eastern North Carolina day. It was 80 in the room, and she didn't even pant, and flew great. So Casey, if I could encourage you to do anything, it would be to give those big Finnish or albinos, for that matter, or crosses thereof, or the Czech birds, the Czech German birds. But those larger European goshawks are much calmer than our North American birds. And since Asper is caused by stress, I mean, we all know it's caused by a spore, but the end result is it's caused by a bird's immune system getting compromised with stress. And those birds just don't have it. If you'd have seen a Finnish bird performing at the level she performed at on the coast of North Carolina, it would have blown your mind. So that would be my advice to you if you're an Eastern falconer and wanting to fly a goshawk, and you're concerned about the heat and the humidity, to go the chamber raised or captive bred Finnish bird from Lance or one of those other fine breeders.
Yeah. We've talked about that in the show, but we cannot find a consensus. And me and Aaron have gone back and forth on this with guests for a while. Is it the fact that the European bird is calmer that makes it more resistant to Asper? Or are they actually just biologically more resistant to Asper? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the highest rate of Asper in the U.S. is in the Southwest U.S. A lot of people don't believe that, but that's true. I've studied it. And when you have really good friends that have been on Asper hard for a good part of their life, Steve Lehman and Toby Butterworth and people like that who have done aromatherapy with pine oils and all that, trying to find a way around this tragic disease, you start to really understand. So if it were that they were naturally more immune, that would be one thing. I think because of Pat Rettig Jr.'s great research on stress and Asper, I think it's stress related. And I would watch captive bred birds with other falconers that I knew weren't dotting I's and crossing T's out west, and the birds were dead in a week. Mm-hmm. And you knew when the bird got trapped that it was dead, and you hated it. I mean, you just hated it.
Because who trapped it?
Well, because their attention to stress wasn't where it needed to be. And I'm going to tell you, the guy in the corner of the screen there, he did something that a lot of people would never believe should ever be done in falconry in today's modern times. And the best passage goshawk I had ever went through Dan's protocol for how he treated a freshly trapped goshawk. As a matter of fact, I drove from Commissary Ridge down the mountain. It's 35, 40 minutes to hard surface. Then I drove from Kimmer to Rock Springs at 100 miles an hour. True story. Slid into Dan's driveway like I was a crack addict. Came running into his garage and said, "You got to help me out with this right now. We got to get this done." And Dan said, okay, relax. I got this. And she turned out to be the very best passage bird I ever had. But what Dan did addressed, and if he wants to talk about this, he can if he doesn't understand. But what Dan did address stress. Yeah. And everything that Dan told me, the way she was going to react through that training is exactly how she reacted to the letter, to the hour that it happened, to the day that it was going to happen on, was exactly how Dan said it was going to happen. And she turned out to be so pet tame. I mean, she acted like a finished bird. I mean, she was just a freaking, you could have her open in the car, unhooded on a perch in the car and drive her anywhere in town you wanted to drive her. And now this is in Wyoming in the winter, so you weren't worried about heat or anything like that. But people and cars and noises and all that, oblivious to it.
Well, yeah.
And it was a pass the trap bird. So, Danny, I'll let you, Danny, if you want to talk about that, rock
on. Well, first of all, through counsel, I mean, Pat Reddick, I've known Pat Reddick for a long time. I consider him a friend. Him and I have been talking over the year for decades. I treat, I don't know, there's other drugs to use now for asper, preventative prophylactic treatment for asper is I would, as soon as I get a bird home, with the hood on, a couple, 3 hours after I trap it, if I had a bird I knew I was going to keep, I would just pack everything up and go home. I was 100 miles almost exactly from my door to where I put my blind up. So I would just pack. I could be home in 3 hours. I would pick a little piece of chicken breast or something and dip it in water, put the pill in its mouth, and I'd pop and give it its first dose. It was itraconazole. I know there's another drug they use now too. There's a couple of different brands, but we use itraconazole. I think people use voriconazole now. Voriconazole used to be very expensive, but it's probably the generic form is probably cheaper now. Yeah. But I haven't treated a bird in, I haven't had a passage goshawk in over 10 years. So I sealed my birds.
Okay.
I sealed my eagles and I sealed all my goshawks. And
I know guys on the east that still do that. But
I sealed other people's goshawks. Yeah. I sealed my goshawks, other people's eagles, my eagles, and then you don't have to do it. I never sealed any of my prairie falcons because the people that I was meant. See, you never stop learning, and I picked. Everybody has an opinion. Prairie falcons have been around a long time, but I found two people that I really respected who had a lot of success flying prairie falcons. Really highly successful. And I listened to them. They were my mentors. And they turned out exactly what they said they were going to turn out. And they wound up liking me. Well, if a prairie falcon can like you, but you have to respect them. And I treated my birds very well. So when I get these goshawks, I prophylactically treat them the first day. I talked, there's a vet that used to be up in Abu Dhabi, but he's not, he's in Fort Collins, Colorado now, an old friend of mine. He said, Dan, he says, every goshawk you pull out of a trap is going to have asper. It is. It's in the air. They maintain this level of resistance when they're in the wild. They're at good weight and everything. But the fungus is opportunistic. Their immune system goes down. They get stressed and they come down with full-blown asper. So, and it's a degenerating, terrible disease. I had an eagle die from asper once, and it was slower in an eagle than it would be in a goshawk, but anyway, it was terrible. I had someone teach me how to seal birds. Actually, Jack Stoddard taught me how to treat birds. He's gone now, but Jack is an old-time falconer, very well respected, flew peregrines for 50 years. He passed away several years ago. He helped me seal my first eagle, and I practice on pigeons and everything. And when I sealed my first goshawk, and there's a special way to seal them so they don't bleed, and the bottom eyelid is the one that stretches, and you put it up over their head, and you tie it in a knot. And I only keep them sealed. Sealing completely relieves stress. I sealed a goshawk in the field once, and had the perch in the blind, and it was up on 1 foot, tucked, all puffy, a half an hour after I trapped it.
Jeez,
with a hood on.
Wow.
Now, I always put a hood on them. See, there are conditions. You can't control what other people do, and I would never advise anybody to seal a bird because they're not me.
Right.
And I've come to the conclusion that you can't control what other people do, but I would never dream of keeping a sealed bird unhooded. And my sealed birds were sealed, hooded, and a pitch dark room when I wasn't present. Dark where you can't see your hand in front of your eyes. That dark. Black dark.
Yeah.
And cool. Out in the garage, cool, with tarps over every crack in the garage, and I on a concrete floor, on a perch, on a bull perch, and it's chilling. It's just having a good time. And the first day after you trap them, you can feed them, you can tease their mouths. You know how you get them when they're sealed, but it completely takes the stress off them, and it's different than being hooded. Now a hood after I always kept them hooded because if they scratch their eyes, you don't want them grabbing a thread, right? That's just common sense. But the people that taught me how to do it, and I think there's a couple of veterinarians here that are falconers that have written books on the Arabian falconry, and they seal their birds regularly.
Yeah.
And if you want to do it properly, it wasn't necessary to do in my prairie falcons because the people that taught me how to do it said you don't need to do it, and they had sealed birds in the past, other species, but not prairie falcons. So you don't have to seal peregrines. Yeah, I mean, if you don't need to do it, you don't need to do it. But I did it with a goshawk because they can break a tail feather baiting off your fist, can't they, Dave?
Absolutely.
So you just want to immobilize them. You want to sedate them but you still got to work with them. So I take the hood off and I get them to eat, and I tug the food a little bit and I put it down and I yank it on there, and until they smack it on their lips a little bit, and they can start eating. And after the second day or something, you put food on there and I whistle and I feed them multiple meals with no casting. I don't want any casting because I keep the hood on, and they can deal with not being heavy cast. I seal them for 4 or 5 days, 6 days, and 5 days, 6 days at the most. And there's a reason why you unseal them too, is I whistle. I feed them 7 or 8 times a day. I just pick them up and I start whistling or making some kind of a gesture, and and they can't see. So you've got to steer the food, and I can keep it between my thumb and index finger, and they'll eat on your fist. Perfect with their wingtips over their tail.
Yeah.
And then you do that multiple times a day, 10 times a day, 8 times a day for 5 or 6 days. And then I would have my wife, I'd let them empty out. I wouldn't feed them that whole day, but I'd be whistling, giving a cue, and that's how they eat. So and it's happened. I mean, it's amazing. You should try it, but if you're ever going to do it, but my wife would sit in a chair. I had a candle in the room on a table. We had the bird cast with its back on her. She'd have her like this, and I'd have a little pen flashlight in my hand, in my mouth, and I'd cut the seals with a pair of scissors. I'd pull the seals out, right? And and then I put the hood right back on again. And I put it up on the fist, put it on the perch, and let it empty out, let its eyelids stretch back to normal after 3 or 4 hours, 3 hours. So I go 11 o'clock at night, I go in there and I have the candle there, and I take the goshawk and I'd unhood it, and it'd freak out a little bit, but it'd bait and come back up again. But it can't see me because I've got just a little candle, little flashlight or something in there, very dim. But I put some meat on my fish, and well, listen to this. This is really, it's pretty funny. But I'd whistle. I go, and it would stop, and it'd look between its legs.
Yeah.
I couldn't help it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't help it. It was like a robot.
Challenge.
I go, because it did it 100 times for the last 5 days. 100 times. It hears this. And it goes, I don't want, no.
Right. It snaps out of it.
Oh, and then I start tickling its toes with its food. Oh, and then I bring some food up to it, and it goes, it starts smacking its lips, and I bring it down there. It'll eat. But I emptied it out. I didn't feed it. And that's, you make progress. The reason you unseal a bird is when you cannot make any more progress with it. That's what I was taught. You seal them for a reason, to get them over that hump. And another reason you could seal them is to get a hood perfectly fit. I have 4 or 5 hoods here, and I can which one? And I can spit on it and get the beak opening all wet, and I can open it with my fingers, and I can push it towards it around its sear and get it welded, just perfectly molded, so it doesn't cross the gape, And I don't know, I like this one. Yeah. And the bird's just sitting there unconscious. It's sitting there like a stone statue. It doesn't move. It doesn't flinch. It doesn't open its beak. You might as well do it on a plaster mold. I mean, it's perfect.
And so the sealing, it stimulates a response in the bird that it's sleeping, or because of the eyes are closed, because you're not artificially making it dark with the hood.
Yeah,
its eyes are physically closed, so it does something in their brain.
Right, they're just totally, eyesight's their whole world. But they've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years. I watched those guys in Pakistan and India, and I watched some of those Arab seal sakers, and it's the exact same thing. And it wasn't my idea, but somebody taught me how to do it, who learned how to do it, who did it with. I think they did it with prairies and goshawks.
Okay.
So
makes sense.
And there's a way to seal them too, and the material you use. So when you take the seal out after 6 weeks, Dave, you can't even tell they were sealed, can you? It leaves no mark on their eyes. I mean, you can't. It's undetectable,
right?
If you do it right.
So now, when you say that there's no more progress that can be made during this sealing, the time that the bird is sealed, you're manning not through sight and stimulus around you. You're manning through audible hearing, touching, whistling, stepping up to the glove, going back on a perch, stepping on a scale, stepping off the perch. So you are doing manning. It's just not anything visual yet. So when you're saying when the bird will
and food,
step up to the glove calmly and take food from your fingers, and when
food
it doesn't
association with a sound.
Okay, so you're doing the primary, whatever you want to say, primary reinforcement, and then when it's not freaking out when you touch it, with a feather on its wing, and you're touching it, and it doesn't freak out and lose its mind, and it's kind of calm and it's eating, you're like, okay, there's not really much else to do. Let's start the visual side of the manning, basically.
Well, it's sort of.
Okay.
It's like when you touch it on the back, a sealed bird on the back with a feather, it doesn't move anyway.
Really?
It doesn't do anything. You can go like this, you can pat it and stroke it, you can do this, you can.
Oh, that's crazy.
Now, if you do a lot of that, when you unseal it and you start to do that, it remembers it and it doesn't freak out as much.
Okay. So you're getting a jump
on.
It
goes, oh, I remember this. And you start, you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
Okay. Yeah. So
it makes perfect sense. Yeah. Cause I saw Seth Roy, who he's a student of Lance Christensen, has a really good breeding projects in PA, has all, same genetics of him, follows what Lance does. It's one of the sponsors of the show. And I watched him work with a tiercel chamber, parent reared bird. And, it was late at night. We're all by the fire, and, there's a couple other falconers there, and we were just hanging out. And he was explaining how you can, it's not all just like pulling the hood off and like getting the bird used to like what it's seeing. There's a whole nother process of the bird getting used to what it's hearing, stepping up to the glove, going back on a perch, touching it, giving it food through the hood and communicating with your mouth that means food.
Right.
Like you can make progress without just ripping the hood off and having it sitting in your living room. Like there's much more you can do before that.
Well, I'm not a real big fan of rip. I take hoods off very carefully.
Well, you know what I mean?
But see, the prescription for prairie falcons that I was totally different. I left alone for 4 days, 4 days, and I had live starlings. And the third day after I trapped it, I trap it on a Monday. So it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Wednesday night, I'll take a live starling between my thumb and index finger, and I'll pick the prairie falcon up, and I'll unhood it, and it looks like it's going to go, and it looks like it's going to split. It's not even looking at the starling. It's going nuts under its feet. I put the hood back on and put it away. Fourth night, and the 4 or 5 prairie falcons I had, they all seem to do it on the fourth day. I don't know why. I don't know what the fourth day is, but it might be just coincidental, but it kind of, that sticks in my mind. I pick it up and got the starling in my fit, like by a wing, and then they start screaming too a little bit. And I unhood the prairie falcon. I'm in a dim room, dark room, sitting down, and that prairie falcon looks and it sees that starling going bam, 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 bam. It reaches down and kills it and starts plucking it and smacking its lips, and eats some of it. And when it stops doing that and looks like it wants an exit, I put the hood on. But I made a heck of an inroad with that bird because it ate on the fist. And I've only had the hood off it twice since the day it was trapped. But it was hungry, and I left it alone for 4 days.
Yeah.
And you know what? It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a big, you got a fat female prairie falcon. It's like they're possessed. I mean, I've had them. Well, I had them come up on my fist a couple times, and they try to bite you through the glove, but it's like, the way that these guys tell me how to do it is, it's just patience, and it's just let them empty out, let them eat. Cause prairie falcons, the weight of their heart is through their stomachs, right? What do you think, Dave?
The weight of my heart.
I used you and me both. I used a different method. I used a round perch, a high perch in the middle of the kitchen, and I'd take freshly trapped prairies off the fly and bring them in and put them on that round perch, and I'd cut up a really good meal, a rich meal like quail or whatever, and every time I walk by that perch, and they're looking at you and trying to bait and they're going nuts, I drop a tidbit up on that round perch and keep moving right on by. And I tell the family to act normal in the room. Certainly not encroach too much on their space, but lightly on their space. Hub Quaid used to say, catch a dozen and throw 10 out the window. And he's about right in that, but because I've trapped, like Danny, I've trapped over 100 or probably
I haven't trapped that many.
Too.
No. Yeah.
Well, my problem being in the Oklahoma Panhandle was my Dallas buddies knew I was there, and you're everybody's best friend. It's kind of like living at the beach when you're in North Carolina, Aaron. All your buddies, hey Dave, haven't seen you forever. I can't wait to come see you.
Having a swimming pool.
Right. So it's the same phenomenon. So, but at any rate, I think our biggest record, the most I ever trapped in a day was 9 in a day. But because the Oklahoma Panhandle is just so rich with them, it's a great wintering area. But I would put them on a round perch that was really well designed by a friend of mine, and just go by. And by day 2, they were really changing, and by day 3, they were looking for you to come by because the tidbits aren't big. And by day 4, you're starting to do Danny's right about the 4th day. On day 4, you're starting to do other training. Now that's the females. The tiercels are so easy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, very rarely in birds of prey do you see such a monstrous difference in attitude by gender. But Mexicanus is really strange. Females, you want to wring their neck. Tiercels are baby dolls. I mean, at the end of the first night, they're almost sitting on your knee in the living room watching TV like you just strapped a red tail. But boy, the females will make you question your faith. I mean, Rose asked me one time, I had this really big bomber female that I'd seen take a pheasant in the wild. And I said, Rose, I got to trap this female. So I trapped it and brought it into the house. And for like a week, it put me through the paces. And Rose was like, I don't know, Dave, there aren't enough pheasants in Oklahoma to make this bird worthwhile. And I said, no, I'm going to weather through it. And she ended up coming around and being okay. But the bird will really make you question yourself. But Danny, I love Danny's routine. And Danny and I talked a lot when he was training prairies. I had a lot of luck. I know McDermott was at the house one time and watched what I was doing with a round perch. And we had a long conversation about whether it would have worked with the accipiters. But boy, it sure worked on problem falcons like prairies. And you know what I'm talking about, a round perch.
That's Dave makes a really good point. The fifth day after I was eating on the bird, I do the same thing with another live starling, right? And eating on the fist. That was it. I'd put it on the round perch for the rest of its time. And that round perch is awesome with female prairies.
Round perch. Can we clarify what you mean by a round perch?
We call them Peter perches. We used to call them Peter perches. They're round, solid. Now it's just a cylinder. Mine's are the way I learned it. It was just a cylinder coming up with astroturf on top, not a crown. You don't want to have a lip, because if they go over the lip, they can hurt their digits on the finger.
So a pole essentially a pole perch?
It's a pole perch.
It is a pole perch.
It's a pole.
How tall?
But extra wide on the top, or no? Because you don't want
just enough so the jets can't go over it. Yeah.
And the tail can't clear. You don't want the tail clearing it.
No, in fact, I put a hole. I bury a hole with a string with a line coming down in the bottom. I use those hardboard concrete molds they use for concrete pillars.
Okay.
And wrap carpet around it, and I had a hole in the bottom where I kept a little quick link, and I had to come out. I fished it through the side so I can go up and down like this, and I could sink the
like this right next to me.
Surface. Excuse me.
So this right next to me, basically.
Yeah. And I put the attachment in the middle, but bury it. I don't want any metal and Layman told me this too. You don't want to have any.
Me too.
You don't want any metal because they'll get a toe and a talon torn. So you want to countersink when you get their swivel, their snap, or anything on their line. You suck it down. And I had a little knot with a steel ball bearing with a hole through it, and the hole was just big enough to put the paracord through. That ball bearing wouldn't fit through the hole, so I locked it, kind of like our lock is on our bow perches and our traps. When you pull all the way, Dave, you know when you can't pull anymore, and you can trigger the bow net because the pigeon's where it's supposed to be and the hawk's where it's supposed to be, and you can flip the trigger. So It's kind of like you just put a lock on it so you don't put it into the net any further. And it's the same concept. And if they go over, they come right back up again. So you want to sit on the edge. But it works. I put in the traffic down in the den, and you had them out eating outside within 7 days after you trap them. And then their learning curve goes pretty fast. They're pretty smart. But I love prairie falcons.
I did too. I love the way they hit. When you live out there and when you hear them hit 100 yards away, wild game. I mean, I can tell you at least a dozen times when I would be sitting watching wild birds and see them take wild game and hear the hit from half a football field to a football field away. I mean, the smack is just. Yeah, if they were 3 pounds, if they were 8 pounds like an eagle, the human race would be endangered.
Yeah, they're the hardest. They're the hardest hitting bird. You think?
No question in my mind. No question.
I don't know if you can see this. You see it?
That's beautiful,
they knock themselves out Casey. A good buddy of mine had a little tiercel, and we jumped some pintails off of a pond in the Panhandle of Texas, and Harley hit that bird, that pintail drake, so hard it killed the drake. But we went up, and the drake was laying on the dam of the pond, and 5 feet away, the prairie falcon, and he thought the bird was dead, put it in his bag, and was mourning in the truck when the bag started coming alive in the floorboard. And Harley was fine. And it actually had a happy ending because Harley lost his voice for about 6 months, and he'd open his mouth and nothing would happen where he normally talked a little bit. But they knocked themselves unconscious. I mean, they're crazy. I mean, they're the Ronnie Lott of raptors. They just are.
I had a female hit a duck so hard it bruised her toes. I had to give her 3-4 days off. Her toes got really pink. You know, she got bruised. She hit him hard, and she didn't break them. But that picture I showed is a Drake mallard that my female prairie killed in the stoop. It was stone dead. That picture was taken a little over a minute after it got knocked on the ground. It didn't even move. She killed it in the stoop, and that didn't happen all the time. She only killed 2 ducks like that, but there was a Drake mallard, and it was a big duck.
Yeah, oh yeah, they're big birds. The Drake mallard. So,
all right, guys. As much as we would love to talk about goshawks and prairie falcons, part of the reason, I think the biggest reason why we got both of you here was for you guys to talk about your experiences with eagles early in American falconry. And would you imagine we've talked for about 2 hours and we haven't even touched that yet?
There's a lot to discuss here with these gentlemen, but we have to control ourselves and stay on subject.
Yeah, I was under your direction. You're the boss. You know, I wanted to follow whatever you guys wanted to do. So
no, you guys, this is great. Thank you, guys. Let's transition over to eagles. And I guess we'll start with you, Dan. So tell us about leading up to your first experience getting an eagle and what all that entailed.
I had when I was a kid in Canada, I lived next to not too far around from a gentleman named Frederick Remler. He was a Finnish. He fled Nazi Germany. He was a Finnish falconer, flew golden eagles, and I got a little bit of taste of that when I was in Canada. When I was a kid, when I moved over to the United States, I kept in contact with them. And that's a whole nother story. But I was exposed to eagles when I was pretty young. And I had a tawny eagle in high school.
That's cool. How'd you get your hands on that?
I got it from a animal supply dealer. It was in 1972, and I had it for 2 years, and I gave it back to him. I traded a Burmese python for it, and he had this tawny eagle, and I had
that was a good deal.
That's a good deal. You could,
yeah, I know. But anyway,
it's crazy.
I was a sophomore in high school, and I had it. It was Daniel. I think his name was Daniel Southwick, Blackstone, Massachusetts, an animal dealer. Anyway, back in the 70s, you could buy raptors through the mail. And I had it a couple of years. I didn't do anything with it. And I when I went away, graduated from high school, I gave it back to him. But when I moved to Wyoming, one of the reasons I moved to Wyoming was I knew that I wanted to be out west to fly birds, like David said. I knew the best falconry in the world was practiced in the United States. I was pretty well convinced of that. And I knew that some of the best falcon in the United States is practiced out west with long wings and maybe even eagles. And there wasn't a whole lot of people flying eagles. You hear stories of people having them back in the day, pre-act birds. And when I went to Rock Springs to teach, I started teaching in 83 on my job. I met a guy, a raptor biologist that was working at one of the coal mines named Steve Platt. Steve and I got to be pretty good friends, and he was finishing his PhD on working with prairie falcons. And part of his study was in Colorado on the Pawnee grasslands in western Colorado. I'm sorry, eastern Colorado. And he asked me if I want to go with him. He was trapping prairie falcons at the nest sites, haggards, adults, and banning them. And if he's trapping the similar adults, he was recording them to see if they're the ones he trapped last year. He was keeping data. His study was a 5-6 year study. Anyway, he was using he had a permit for this owl. He had a one-winged great horned owl that he was using as a lure bird in front of a dugaza. And prairie falcons hate great horned owls. And he put this owl in front of this net. And by the time I turned around, he had this prairie falcon. We were staying with one of his friends in Colorado in Greeley. His name was Jack Stoddard. And that's when I met Jack. Jack was a very famous falconer, was a starter member of NAFA, was in Hal Webster's living room as a 16-year-old kid with Barry Watson when they started NAFA in 1961 in Hal Webster's living room in Denver. And Dave knows Barry Watson and who's the gentleman from anyway, there was several other charter members there. Jack, Barry, a couple other people, I can't remember the names. Anyway, Jack had a golden eagle. It was a pre-act eagle he got it from a friend of his from the Cherokee Indian Nation.
Wow.
It was the Cherokee Indian Native American that gave it to him, a friend of his. And so
that's unique.
I got to be, it was a pre-act bird. I mean, it was technically taken before 1962. Well, I need to do some chronology for you to bring you up to speed. Let me just stop right now on the legal aspect of eagles in the United States and how it all started. Okay, the bald eagles were protected in the early 1940s, called the Eagle Act. In 1962, the golden eagle was amended to the Bald Eagle Act, and it was called the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. Just short form was called the Eagle Act in 1962 for the main reason of a similarity of appearance to immature bald eagles. Immature balds and golden eagles, they said, were hard to differentiate, and they didn't want they didn't want people indiscriminately just killing eagles. And the other reason, there was an indiscriminate amount of killing of golden eagles in the West, especially Texas. There were competitions for how many golden eagles you could shoot out of airplanes using airplanes. They weren't protected. So Congress decided to stop the indiscriminate killing of golden eagles before it became that was one of the reasons too. So they were amended in 1962. In 1972, there was an amendment to the Eagle Act that allowed their use of golden eagles for falconry purposes if, under the conditions they were trapped in depredation situations. Ranchers were complaining about livestock depredation of golden eagles. And I don't know, the data is really sketchy, but it would have been legal under special permits to kill golden eagles depredating on livestock in the early 70s, 1972. This law was created to enable that under special permit. But someone, and I'm not really sure who it was because I get cross stories about it, but someone with some influence in Washington said, well, we want to be able to use them for falconry purposes. Can we get those eagles that were going to be otherwise killed in depredation situation? Can we get them and one of the senators sympathized with that and said yes. And it was a quote in the official adoption of the rule. One of the senators said it is better to use a golden eagle for falconry than it is to kill an eagle. And they were amended in 1972. They were allowed to be used for falconry purposes under the conditions that only eagles trapped because of depredation could be used for falconry. And that's the stipulation we have today. So this is where things started getting questionable to me. Just very strange. 1972, golden eagles were amended. You can look it up. It's the notation's right there. Anybody can look it up in the Federal Register. To be used for falconry purposes. Agencies are responsible for promulgating regulations that, under their authority, under their management, transportation, the armed services, human health and services, and Fish and Wildlife has authority over our nation's wildlife resources. They didn't come up with regulations to use eagles for falconry and acquire them until 1984. It was 12 years after Congress allowed the use of eagles for falconry, a congressional law, the Eagle Act. It's in the Eagle Act under section 668A, paragraph A. This whole section, Native American use, scientific purposes, zoos and museums, falconry purposes. It's one.
You almost gave Casey a heart attack with those sixes there.
I know. I'm sorry. Oh, he
was about to be like the mark of the beast.
I understand. So
always make a joke.
I've raised this question, and it's just I hear nothing but crickets. I said, why? If there's a new tax law Congress passes, and they pass new tax laws all the time, they're promulgated by the next tax year. Congress passes a law to allow the use of depredating golden eagles, which were intended to be killed originally until somebody had the foresight to say, well, if you're going to kill them, can we keep a few for falconry? And the guy said, yeah, sure. So they actually wrote it into the act. Okay. It just seems so absurd to me. It took 12 years for them to come up with regulations. Okay. So I'm in Rock Springs in 1983, and I got my thumb on the pulse. I'm paying attention to this. So 1984, I can't remember. One of my friends told me that these new regulations came out, and I saw them. Oh, there's the eagle regulations. So Steve Platt was the president of the Wyoming Falconer Association at the time. He goes, hey, Steve, I want to try to really get this. I want to push this because, Wyoming would be a great place to fly eagles. Oh, yeah, sure, Dan. So I had the blessings of the Wyoming Falconer Association go over this. So I told Jack Stoddard about this, and Jack had this idea. He had this eagle. He wasn't flying it. His name was Pride, the one he got from the Cherokee Comanches. He said, well, you want to borrow Pride for a year or two and take him to Cheyenne and use him as a lobbying tool. And Pride was a great bird. He was a male. And so Jack lent me Pride, basically transferred to me. I transferred it back to him, but he transferred it to me on a loan. And I had Pride in Rock Springs for 2 years. And I'd take him to Cheyenne with me to go lobby to the Wyoming Senate and the House of Representatives to get eagle falconry, legal. Because right then it was illegal to possess golden eagles. We got the law changed. Didn't specifically mention falconry, but said under permitted conditions, which was fine for me. I didn't care. But so anyway, we got that. I gave Pride back to Jack, and then I started writing letters. I applied for an eagle falconry permit. Who was this? 84. Oh, the regulations stipulated that ADC, which stands for Animal Damage Control, has to declare depredation areas. And at the time in 84, ADC was a department within the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. In 1988, I think it was 88 or 89, ADC was taken out of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and put in the United States Department of Agriculture. The 19 Department of Agriculture, ADC became, because they were on the ground department that was doing most of the on the ground work anyway. And Fish and Wildlife Service thought it was more appropriate to put in the Department of Ag. there were some reasons why that we don't really know what that was, but it's, they were taken out, and now the wildlife, and then ADC changed their name, I believe, in 1997 to Wildlife Services. So, and it made it seem a little more professional. Animal damage control was kind of becoming a politically, it might have been a sensitive name for a department within the Department of Ag. So they changed it to the U.S. APHIS, Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, Wildlife Services, APHIS-WS, under the U.S. Department of Agriculture. However, and this has got real stickler, and this is the straw that broke the camel's back, and this was the loophole that allowed us to trap eagles out of the wild and have the Fish and Wildlife Service basically finally, after much talk and examination, and I had a lot of help, and I'll mention that later. I'll let Dave take over for a while, but I'm going to go. The regulations were written in 1984 under U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service regulations. They were U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service directions. They didn't go back and amend those regulations to say the Fish and Wildlife Service still had the authority to declare depredation areas in 1984. But when ADC left Fish and Wildlife and went into the Department of Ag, they were now under the Wyoming Department of Agriculture. They were no longer under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So I'm sitting at home one night and I'm looking at this, and I had read this regs hundreds of times. I almost had it memorized, and something just hit me. And I went, ADC is not part of Fish and Wildlife anymore. I don't need Fish and Wildlife Services because they would never have declared depredation areas because they had all the authority. Now the authority to declare depredation areas was in the Department of Ag, and they go, yeah, sure, we'll do it. No problem, because we have to deal with the ranchers every day anyway. So they've had all the power and all the control, but it was a division of powers now. Another agency was responsible for declaring depredation areas. I thought, and I asked Frank Bond, he was the legal counsel for NAFA. Him and I became pretty good friends. He helped me. Then I had been for Frank Bond and the Wyoming Game and Fish Department and the Wyoming Department of Ag and the Wyoming Wool Growers, the Wyoming Cattlemen's Association. There were a lot of people, and I got a U.S. Senator involved also. We'd never have had eagles. We would never be trapping eagles today. So I ran this by Frank Bond, and I said, Frank, if you look at all the regs, Fish and Wildlife Service holds all the cards. They give you a permit, they declare depredation areas, and they declare if you can trap one. Okay, if they don't declare depredation areas, they don't have to worry about people trapping birds. But I said, well, they're not in. It's the USDA's call now because they didn't go back and amend those regs. They didn't change them. So I heard nothing but crickets from Fish and Wildlife Service for 2 years because they didn't think they were going to license anyone to keep an eagle anyway. I thought their intention was to regulate it out of existence. So it would make it impossible. Because if they controlled the application process, the depredation areas, they just didn't have to show up in the ranches. And then the ultimate trapping authority? I mean, do you think they would have licensed anyone? No, they wouldn't have. Denver wouldn't have. Do you think they would have, Dave?
Harry Hogan, no way.
So this was an epiphany. This was like, I ran this by Frank Bond, and Frank said, Dan, he says, can we push this now? So I got a U.S. Senator involved, Craig Thomas. His daughter-in-law was a business teacher in the school I taught at. She was married to Senator Craig Thomas's son, was a Wyoming senator, a federal senator.
That's good luck.
And he was very influential, and he helped us. He got me in touch with this field representative, Patty Smith, in Rock Springs. A wonderful lady. And Senator Craig Thomas died of cancer several years ago, passed away. But if it hadn't been for those two people and the multiple Frank Bond and the Game and Fish Department, the director, I was appointed to a wildlife advisory board under Governor Jim Geringer appointed me for 4 years to a wildlife board. The school was very good at giving me time off to attend those board meetings in the capital and around the state. And our job was to mitigate conflict between predators and human health and safety and livestock agriculture. Grizzly bears, wolves, mountain lions, coyotes, black bears, stuff like that. Anyway, and then I was appointed for a second-year term under a different governor who won the election, and that was Ed Friedenthal. And Friedenthal appointed me for another 4 years. And under statutory restrictions, I could only hold two consecutive terms. But it was a pretty good board. They gave us a couple $1 million every other year to give money out for grants for wildlife studies. And our board was also in charge of supervising rabies around the state. We're monitoring rabies. Anyway, so that helped. And eventually, it was 40 years ago. It was a long time ago. But I started in 1984, and I didn't get my first falconry permit. I applied in 1992 for my falconry license. And you have to have all this criteria and everything. And I sent a registered mail return receipt, and they lost my application. And I had the receipt back from me. Someone in the office signed in Denver. They had the audacity. They really did. They said, "We can't find your application. We don't know where it is." I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "I have a receipt here from the U.S. Post Office, registered mail return receipt." I couldn't read the writing. I still have the receipt. I have it in my files. It's the green card, postcard, and somebody signed down below. And I said, "We don't have it." I said, "What do you mean you don't have it?" "Well, you have to apply again." "Really?" Oh, so you can't make this up. You can't make this stuff up. So anyway, I applied again. And I was denied the second time when they got it. They denied my application because they didn't. You have to have 2 letters of recommendations from notable falconers with eagle experience. One was Jack Sutter. The other one was Ingmar Remler, Frederick Remler's son, which is probably in his 60s then. And they didn't know who Ingmar Remler was. So I called up Ingmar. I said, "I got my application denied. This is the second. This is the one that the second one I submitted. They didn't lose that one. And I got a receipt for that one too. So he wrote him a second letter, said, "You may not," okay, wrote him a 2-page letter, said, "My father, we've hunted wolves in Finland and in Russia with eagles. And my father was a very famous eagle falconer in Finland and blah, 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 blah. And he'd been flying eagles since just after World War I. He started flying eagles in wilderness areas in Russia. He'd take a boat and be on an island, and he'd be the only human being on an island. They'd hunt fox with him, So anyway, I got the permit, but it had all these restrictions on it. And one of the restrictions on my eagle falconry permit says, this eagle, that's in case I got one, right? This eagle remains the property of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and may be recalled at any time on my falconry permit. So what? They were really. So Frank saw that letter, and we wrote him another letter, and they just kept ignoring this. And I had my final eagle falconry permit issued without these restrictions. It was the 8th falconry permit, and Frank was ready to file a lawsuit in U.S. Federal District Court in Cheyenne. And I have the brief. It's huge. And a week before he was going to file, he sent a letter to the by this time, migratory birds had taken over. And I had my eagle falconry permit, but had all these restrictions. And I said, "This isn't right. Shouldn't be like this," because I don't think other permits were written like that. And because there were 7 regions within the United States, and it almost seemed like each regional office had so much autonomy. They treated each region like a different country. And if you had a really nice person in charge in Atlanta, in Portland, in Denver, wherever it was, you could almost administer the regs any way you want. It was open to interpretation. So we got that worked out. And I got my first eagle. They were trapping birds in South Dakota, and I got one of those birds in South Dakota. And that was in, I believe that was in 1995. Oh, prior to that, I did get a trapping permit in the state of Wyoming. I actually took some notes here. I did get a trapping permit, a letter of authority from the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Wyoming, authorizing, it was June 6, 1994, letter of authority from Mr. Bill Reitmeyer, Director U.S. U.S. Department of Agriculture, Casper, Wyoming, authorizing me to trap a golden eagle in a depredation area in Wyoming. This authorization was, and then the next day it was suspended to me by a phone call by Mr. Reitmeyer, the person in Denver in charge of assistant regional director of law enforcement, called Reitmeyer and told Reitmeyer that his agents would be responsible if I damaged any eagle that I trapped. And he called me. He says, Dan, I can't put any of my agents under that kind of risk, and I'm going to have to deny your permit, and I'm going to revoke it. So I had it on the 6th, and it was revoked on the 7th. So I knew something was up. What it was is that Reitmeyer had sent a copy or faxed a copy of my trapping authorization to Denver. Denver read it and said, no, we're not going to, that's my only explanation, because I didn't tell them I had a trapping permit. They probably CC'd a copy of the letter to Denver Fish and Wildlife, but it was all in the up and up, and it was perfectly legal, but he stonewalled it right there and said, stop. And the way he stopped it said, well, you can go trap an eagle, but if that eagle's ever injured, I'm holding your agents responsible. And that's what happened. And I have the documentation to show it. And I have the letter too. I have all the original paperwork.
All the evidence.
Yes. So there were birds being trapped in South Dakota, and I was offered a bird in South Dakota, and I got one of those birds. Yeah. Anyway.
So much drama.
Well, I know. Is this making sense at all?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
I mean, is this, I haven't talked about this in years. I'm not sure if,
well, let me rephrase that. I follow you, but the logic behind all of this is just so hard for me to wrap my mind around. It's just so dramatic for you to get your hands on an eagle.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, we wound up getting it pretty well for a while. It was about 12 years there. We could trap an eagle anytime we wanted, basically.
Yeah.
And it worked. We know they're responsible, but I'll let Dave. Dave can fill in some of the gaps here.
It just never quit. I mean, you're talking about the 80s and 90s, and I got into it in the early 2000s, and it just got worse and worse and worse, and personalities got involved. We had out over the West, we had a MBA head that was mentally ill. I think that's the only fair way to describe her. She retired with mental issues, nervous breakdowns, and she was committed not to let an eagle be taken. And my eagle application was supposed to have 2 letters. I sent 12, and she fought it for over a year. And the eagle application I sent in was 68 type pages long. Detailed diagrams of mews and that were done by CAD. My nephew was a architect, and he did all of my diagrams by CAD. And this lady in Albuquerque was just convinced she wasn't going to let an eagle falconer exist in the Southwest U.S. And it was a battle that went on. You had a very renowned member of the Fish and Wildlife Service that was a falconer stand up in front of a NAFA field meet in Garden City, Kansas, and lie to everybody in the room. Tell them that we're taking eagles, we're in good shape, and none of us have been allowed to take an eagle for a couple of years. And I called him out in the meeting. I mean, I just stood up and said, "Are you going to tell them, or do you want me to tell them that what you just said was a lie?" And you could have heard a pin drop. There were 500 falconers in the room. And he said, "Well, maybe not last year, maybe not in the last couple of years. You know it. You're here at NAFA to act like you're a falconer, and we know first and foremost you're a Fish and Wildlife Service employee. And please don't stand up in a room full of falconers and tell them U.S. Fish and Wildlife success stories with this room. And what you need to be thinking about, you folks from NAFA, is if they can do it to us with eagles, what do you think was going to happen when they decide that goshawks are low in population, or prairie falcons are low, or merlins? What's going to be their next? If they can get us, they can get you." And the room erupted in conversation. And he slithered on off of the stage, and the falconers took over the conversation. But it was just I'll give you an example of a story. Danny helped me learn how to trap eagles, but there was still a lot to be learned on trapping. And I called Oneida Victor, the trap company, and told him what I was trying to do. And Oneida said, "You're in luck. We just finished helping the University of Notre Dame trap Louisiana blue herons. And we figured out that if we use a certain trap and we offset the jaws of the trap, this is a leg hole trap. We offset the jaws of the trap a 16th of an inch, and we rubber pad the jaws that a tender tarsi, like on a great blue heron, wouldn't be damaged, but they would be caught and held there for you to come get them for research." So we sent them to Notre Dame. The traps worked great, and you ought to try them on eagles. So we tried them on eagles, and they worked fabulously. And all you had to do was find a depredating eagle and set out a splayed jackrabbit and put 6 traps around him, put wax paper over the trap, cover it with ant mound sand that Dan was just telling you about, the mounds, because the ground's frozen in the winter. You're in snow. And off the end of the trap have a 5 or 6 foot link of chain, and off of it have a 30-foot piece of traffic tape, highway tape, and it's all underground. And when it detonates on the eagle's foot, he pulls the chain up out of the ground, and the highway tape flips in the wind, and he drags it off into the sage. And he's really easy to find, because when you see a detonation at a trap site, you just look for the tape, and when you see the tape flipping in the wind, there's your eagle. And I had.
Hang on one sec, Dave. I'm sorry. The wax paper you're talking about, can you describe how that was applied?
The traps would freeze underground. If you just put the trap in the ground and covered it with sand, eventually it would still freeze, and the trap jaws would stay open because they were frozen. So if you dug it out, put the trap down, covered it with wax paper, and then put a light covering of the ant mound sand, then you got a detonation every time. And we became
the paper would be folded up over the eagle's foot.
Yes, and it never damaged a toe or a tarsi. Smaller birds, corvids, ravens, ferruginous hawks, bycatch, for lack of a better term, wouldn't be damaged either. So it was a really safe way to do it. But I'll give you an example of the trouble we had. I had a trap set on the Utah border in Wyoming, and I knew that this rancher was getting hammered. He was losing a lot of lambs, and there were a lot of eagles hanging out during his lambing season. And he was not shed lambing; he was lambing out in the field, and he was threatening to kill all these eagles with his rifle in defense of his sheep herd. And we begged him not to, and I told him, "Look, we're going to take care of this." And I had a good relationship, thanks to Danny, with the regional fish and game guy in Wyoming that was over the region. And I called him and told him the situation. He said, "Dave, get him out of there. Don't let him get shot." So we set traps, and I came in, and this trap site looked like a bomb had hit it. There were several eagles trapped. So there were falconers there that had permits that got their eagles, but there was an eagle there at the trap site that looked extremely emaciated and about to die. And I took the trap off of it, and it couldn't leave. And so, and Danny is a biologist. He knows a lot more about this than I do, but young female eagles will attach themselves to a male eagle, and they'll take everything he catches. And in a lot of cases in Wyoming, they starve their male siblings to death, being parasitic off of their kills. And the eagle that I flew for all those years, I literally watched him that morning feed 2 females before he was allowed to keep the 3rd white-tailed jackrabbit he caught. And so he had to feed them before he could eat. Wow. And in this case, there's a lot of good material on that. But at any rate, this poor male had been feeding 4 or 5 females, and he was emaciated and gone. And I called this regional guy from Fish and Wildlife, and he said, "Dave, take him home." And I said, "Well, I already have an eagle." He said, "You can have another one by law." I said, "I know, but I haven't applied for a trapping permit and a letter and all of that kind of stuff and gone through the Fish and Wildlife Service." He said, "You take that eagle home and tell the Fish and Wildlife Service to send you a band. Don't let a coyote kill that eagle." So I took it home, and I sent in a 3186, to which I got an overnighted package back. First I got a email typed in all caps and red letters. I mean, you can't make this up. This lady was crazy about she's going to take my firstborn child, and I'm going to be in Leavenworth for the rest of my life, and I'm a villainous a-hole, and yada 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 yada. So I sent her an email back saying, "Show me where anything you're requiring is in the law. I need a band. You're putting me in violation. Please send me my band." And then I called her supervisor, who turned out to be a really nice guy, and discussed it with him. And he said, "Dave, don't worry, you'll have a band tomorrow." And the next day, an overnight package arrived at my house in the Panhandle, Oklahoma, and I had a band. And the poor eagle was so emaciated, I just let him walk on the ground at the ranch, and I would just throw him food constantly. And after about a week, he could fly. And after about 2 or 3 weeks, he could fly really well. And that was the manning period for that eagle. And he turned out to be a great falconer eagle, by the way. But that's an example of how we had to deal with eagles. And Danny fought the early fight, and I got involved in it in the middle of the game when they were trying to take it away from us. There was some trapping misconduct in Wyoming, and they used it as an excuse to put a moratorium on it, and we had to fight to get it back. And they were all behind giving the Native Americans 24 eagles a year, but wouldn't give us 6. And I mean, that's what we finally settled on. I think it was 6 eagles. But so I mean, there was all kinds of. Go ahead.
They allow the Native Americans to kill some of those eagles they take, don't they?
The Hopis take them and eat them, yes. And so it was really difficult. I mean, we went to meeting after meeting after meeting. Danny never stopped fighting. I didn't stop fighting about it. It was just after a while, after 2 or 3 years. I don't know how Danny did it all the years he did it, but I did it like 3, maybe 4 years, and then I finally just decided, I've got my eagle, and I don't want that to sound selfish, but it's time for these guys that are coming up in it to fight it, because I've fought it all I can fight it. I mean, George Allen's. I was standing in an airport in Philadelphia one day from work, and I said, George, this isn't right. I'm talking about George Allen, and Allen said, sue me. And I said, so that's what it's going to take. We're going to have to sue you. And at the time, NAFA didn't want to spend money litigating on eagles because they were heavy in the peregrine fight, and that's where all the money.
They still are.
That's where all the money was going. And by the way, at the time, Aaron, we had a North Carolinian that had become president of NAFA, and I was really hoping in private conversations with him that I could get something done, but it never happened. We were always prioritized way down the totem pole. That's why I cut loose on the Fed at Kansas about lying to the group, because I said, look, guys, if they can put us in a hole like they have and stop us from taking eagles after all the work that pioneers like Danny did, what do you think they're going to do? What they were citing was conservation studies on eagles. When they put the moratorium on, before they would take it off, they paid some really low budget conservation studies. And I mean, like, no airplanes, no aerial surveys, no nest counts. A handful of college students would give them their data, kind of thing. And and so when we got these studies and we started ripping them apart, we were like, this isn't a study. This is a joke. What did you pay for it? And we'd find out they'd pay like $100K for a study or whatever. And I mean, in other words, they weren't serious about it. So they would quote this data and say, we're not going to allow take because eagles are on decline in the U.S. Well, keep in mind now, this is before wind generation in the U.S. So at any rate, we were seeing not only stable populations, but in some cases, the population was expanding. So we knew the surveys were nonsense. Danny and I would stay on the phone until midnight, ranting, just walking in our living rooms, just cussing at the phone, because we know it was all voodoo biology. I mean, it was a way to make us shut up and go sit in the corner. And as much as I love NAFA and the thought behind NAFA in those days wasn't any help. And Frank Bond, really, Danny's correct to speak kindly about Frank, because Frank wanted to help in the worst kinds of ways, but he was the attorney for NAFA, and he was told where to direct his attention. And it certainly wasn't golden eagles. So it's an absolute shame. If you sit on a canyon in Wyoming and watch young lambs get picked off one at a time by young passage eagles, and you know that the rancher is ultimately going to take matters in his own hands if somebody doesn't help him, and you know that falconers, primarily Western falconers, because that's who should have eagles, is people that are around the game to be able to properly fly them. And when you know they could be part of the answer, thanks to the hard work that Dan and a number of others did, and nobody can take them. So, what do you think happens to those eagles? I mean, let's be real. And you can't blame ranchers. I mean, they've got a business to run and a family to feed. So, and what the legitimate ranchers did was they started shed lambing. They started bringing all their lambing inside, which is tremendously expensive. Yeah. So there go their profits. Dan can speak to that a lot more than I can, but it has been a very frustrating time, and my heart goes out to the young falconers in the country that are trying to fly eagles today. Because I'm telling you, goshawkers, you have never chased a black-tailed jackrabbit in your life till you've chased one with a conditioned, and I mean conditioned, tiercel golden. I mean, it is. You want to talk about adrenaline and addiction? I mean, it's the most amazing flight in falconry that's not from a long wing. It is. It's incredible. And I recommend anybody out west that wants to fly an eagle, and they should be able to fly them. That's what's always broken my heart. But I'm just really grateful to Danny for getting me during that window. I hit the right window after Danny got it all through. I hit that window and took my bird. I applied in 2004 and I got my permit in 2006. 2 years of bureaucratic garbage, and finally took a bird in January of 2006.
Wow. So what I'm hearing is everything was kind of, it was a fight. It was always a fight. But then at a certain point, something happened where I'm reading between the lines. Somebody did something they shouldn't have during that time, which was what gave the feds their excuse, or the Fish and Wildlife Service their excuse to put their thumb back on everybody from one person's actions. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what happened exactly? Because I'm curious.
Without mentioning names, you were required to attend your traps,
right?
So that when the eagle got caught, you could go in and quickly take care of it. And this person didn't attend their traps. And a bald eagle got in a trap. Bald eagles are common in the West. They will feed on ground game. They'll switch to anything during the winter, cold winter when the water freezes. And this falconer didn't tend their trap, and the bird blew into a pump jack station. It was found by a petroleum worker. So just a bad situation. And thanks to that carelessness, where one falconer should have been punished, that's a case where you don't punish the masses for one person's actions, but that's basically what we had to deal with.
Okay.
Well, actually, they caught a male golden eagle also. And the regional supervisor in Green River called me. They caught the bald eagle was caught and flew away with the trap. And an oil field worker found it was Derek, you said, in the oil field. And they called a game warden, and that bird was still pretty strong. And the warden told me that he just threw his coat over it, got the foot out of the trap, and released the bald eagle. I guess it was a haggard. But
it's crazy to me. I mean, they were just looking for a reason.
Several days later, they found a male golden eagle dead, an adult, a haggard male that was starved to death. And the regional supervisor in Green River called me for the Game and Fish Department, asked me if I'd come to the office to look at the bird and see if I could identify the trap. Left its foot in the trap, and it had a foot in its trap, and it had a plastic chain on it. A white plastic grandma rose garden chain, one of those.
Yeah, like a Halloween decoration.
Anyway, its keel was so sharp you could pick the bird up with its keel. It had started to digest its breast tissue. I mean, I don't know how long it would take a healthy male golden eagle to starve to death, but that thing literally starved. And
is this the same guy?
Yeah, I excuse me?
It was the same individual for both situations?
Well, I don't know. We don't know. Nobody was ever, I don't know. But nobody took any responsibility for it, and nobody was ever held accountable for it. But anyway,
blamed it on us, though.
They that was in 2008. That 6 eagle quota that people are talking about, that was an arbitrary figure. That number was arrived at because that was the average number of birds that were harvested in that 12-year period that we had the eagle take.
Mm.
Some years it was 2, some years it was 8, some years it was 5, whatever, but 6 was the average number. And you can do the math and just divide everything, and it's 6 eagles. Now, if we would have taken 15 or 20 eagles, maybe they would have kept it at 6. But there's no reason why I want to. Dave, do we have time? Do you want to tell that story about the Game and Fish Department? The Wyoming Game and Fish Department was willing to administer the entire take of eagle falconry in the country by we wrote. I helped write an amendment to an existing statute and walked it over to the Senate chambers with Dave to allow the Game and Fish Department through their commission to administer the take. And they needed the language for some reason. The director of the Game and Fish Department was the AD&B that I had been on the board, the Animal Damage Management Board. I was still living in Wyoming. I had moved to Kansas yet. And I had been off the board that previous year, 2012. But there was something up to do with eagles, and I was invited to come to the meeting. And Dave, I don't know how you got there. You were there. I invited you to come with me. You were in the meeting with us. So anyway, the director at the time was Scott Talbot of the Game and Fish Department. Said, well, I said, why doesn't just, this is when falconry was being handed over to the states, and falconry was being administered by the states with the feds still having the authority, of course, but they kept the authority of the take out of the wild for golden eagles. And I thought that was a little weird because they could have just, hopefully peregrines, if they're ever normalized, but gyr falcons, prairie falcons, merlins, goshawks, the feds gave the states the authority to administer falconry. They had to come up with their own exams and everything. George Allen had or the Department, the Fish and Wildlife Service had to, someone in his department had to okay they had to make sure that they met the federal standards, the exams, and they had come up with their own regs, or you could just adopt the federal regs. And we were trying to head it off. I didn't know I was going to move to Kansas then. I didn't really know I was going to be moving until around April 2013. This is January. Now, the odd years, normal session bills are allowed to be entered for consideration to be passed for laws. Even number years are budget sessions only. Budget topical bills, that session meets for 20 days, and the even number years, the Senate and the House meet for 40 days. So this was an odd year. The timing was perfect, because if this had been an even year, in 2014, I wasn't living in Wyoming yet. So we took this opportunity. I talked to Scott, and Scott said, I'll bring somebody from our office. You sit down, you draft a sentence that'll amend to that existing statute, allowing us to administer the Game and Fish Department. Well, I just so happened that a Wyoming State Senator was a guidance counselor in the school I taught at, or something to, teaching the same building for 30 years. She had a PhD in counseling, a wonderful lady. She was a Wyoming State Senator, and I had her cell number. We were very good friends. So Senate's I'm in Cheyenne. Dave's in Cheyenne. I call her up on the phone. I said, "Hi, Bernie, this is Dan." "Oh, hi, Dan. How are you?" "Good." "Hey, I'm at a meeting in the Game and Fish Department, and we have an amendment to an existing statute we want to amend for so the Game and Fish can administer the take of eagles for falconry." And she's been watching me for 25, 30 years. She's like, "Oh, okay." I said, "Can we bring it over? Scott's here. He's going to okay it." Scott Talbot's the director who was appointed by the governor. He says, the director of the Game and Fish Department just asked me to do it. So we did it. And there was another guy that helped me. He helped me. We gave it to Scott. He goes, "Yeah, go ahead." He green, he yellow, he stamped it. Dave and I got in our cars. We drove over the state channel. She says, I'll make sure you go through security. This is on the Senate floor where the governor is walking around. She says, bring it over to the Senate chambers. I'll make sure security lets you in. So she goes and meets us at the door. I go like this. I go, oh, hi, Bernie. Oh, hi, Dan. I hug her and everything. This is Dave Stevens, my friend. Oh, hi, Dave. How are you? Can I show you around for a little bit? He goes, she probably heard that North Carolina twang from Dave Stevens. And he goes, oh, you aren't from around here, are you? So anyway, here it is. And she was a very influential senator in the state. She had a lot of political power. So she goes, where is it? I handed her the bill. She introduced it, went into committee, got admitted for due pass. She entered it onto the floor, got passed unanimously in the Senate. I guess the next day or the couple days later, it got passed unanimously in the House. It was signed into law in February, and I gave it. Dave and I handed it to her in January.
Wow!
So who does that? And then me, as a falconer that helped write a bill for eagle administration. Okay, so now all this is in place because I thought I was very comfortable when I found out I was leaving Wyoming. I left this thing intact where the Game and Fish Department could have administered all of the take of wild golden eagles because after the hype and everything, they're only going to trap a couple 3 years anyway. That's why the 6 year quota was so low because that was the average number. But now there's a bottleneck of 35 or 40 people, and if you apply, I suggested that a person sit out. If you apply and successfully draw, you should sit out for 5 years. Because if you draw, there's some special trophy game animals in Wyoming that if you draw special, you're not allowed to enter into the draw for 5 more years. Mountain goats, sheep. I don't know if don't quote me on that because I'm not sure.
You're probably right.
It gives people more, it gives the pool because if I put my name in the hat and I can trap a golden eagle this year, why? And if I could draw technically, statistically, it's not impossible. I could draw again next year. Someone's put in every year for 10 years has never been able to draw. So you need to take the successful people. That's if you draw. That doesn't mean if you trap a bird because the way it goes, if you trap, if you put your name in your hat and if you draw, you better come to get a bird. If you don't, you lose your eligibility for 5 years. I mean, that would kind of loosen it up a little bit, but I talked to these guys. I said, if he would have if you want to cap it, it had no ceiling and it's not in the regulations. There's nothing in the regs.
Okay.
Make it 20 birds. But after 2 or 3 years, it had gone down to 2 or 3 birds a year. Because everybody knows Dave, and Dave would support this. After 3 or 4 years, some people want to get rid of their birds because they're a lot of work, and people figure out that it might not be their cup of tea. So
it's not fun to throw a bird food every day and not fly it.
Well, but they're an apex predator, and I think they can. They're not toys. You have to respect it. Golden eagles can be very dangerous. Well, not a passage bird, not if you take care of it properly. Anyway, so getting back to the story about handing the legislation, the senator going back and writing that amendment. I've got it right here. I've added it. I've got the sentence that I actually wrote. Anyway, The Fish and Wildlife Service just flushed that down the toilet. They could care less. Okay.
What the heck?
Yeah. We met with the governor in 2011. I did. Governor Matt Mead in his Senate chambers. Were you there, Dave?
Yeah.
Were you at that meeting?
Yes.
Oh, you were with Matt Mead?
Yes. Governor Mead, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, really? I forgot about that. Was Sam there?
Crow?
No, but his boss was there. Krisky was there. Game and Fish.
Krisky was, not Sam.
Krisky, you, me, Game and Fish director. Oh, and Bill Volker from the Comanche Indian Nation.
Yes. Sia. Yeah.
Sia. So he called the Secretary of the Interior, which is on a stipulation within the Eagle Act, and he says, we want to trap eagles. So they let us trap 6 that year in 2011 because we kind of broke that because they didn't allow anybody to trap after 2008. from that
situation.
people that trap those eagles and let their traps carry away their traps. They didn't have any background. Those people weren't skilled in trapping eagles. I mean, that should never have happened. But
we trapped their birds and handed them out.
Yeah, we trapped 5 of the 6.
Yeah, do you remember that, Danny?
Yeah. Yep. We trapped. How long? It didn't take us that long to trap those birds either, did it?
A week.
Yeah.
Really? That's crazy.
Yeah, we could have done it a lot faster, but we were having too much fun.
It was hot too. It was warm out.
Yeah, it was hot. It was hot.
So now, what do you think is the? Go ahead, Aaron. You probably have something more profound to say than me.
Go ahead, Aaron.
I'm not sure if this is the direction Casey want to go, but I feel like we've got a good grasp of the history and the problems that have risen since. I'm curious what you guys, with your vast experience, think the future of eagle take is.
It's exactly what I was going to ask. Literally, I'm not even joking. That's literally what I was going to ask.
There's another aspect of this. You guys aren't even mentioning it. Dan's being kind, I think, but you have to mix into this that there have been people in our sport, in eagle falconry, that had relationships with the feds that got special treatment. And they became clearinghouses for eagles, and all you had to do to get an eagle was kiss the ring. And
tell us about that, please.
Please tell us about that, because that was a conspiracy theory that we.
Well, I don't want to get into too long about it, and the only reason I bring it up is while we were trying to get it legislated and correct and black ink dry on white paper done, meanwhile, there is a conduit that you could get a golden eagle through that bypassed all of it based on rehab regulations. And there was a veterinarian involved, and there was a regional fish and wildlife person involved, and then there was one central falconry person involved, and so you had conflicting energies going in 2 different directions. Young falconers were either trying to fast track it to avoid what we were going through, and I can completely understand that and sympathize that, by trying to get a rehab bird. And there were other falconers that couldn't stomach that process and decided to try to wait on the legal process and continued to fight the fight, in other words. So, as often happens in our sport, and I know Danny will back this up, and you guys have been falconers long enough, I know you've seen it, falconers are their own worst enemies.
Yeah.
If we would have combined our talents and our energies and not splintered over egos, and it appears to me the bigger the bird gets, the more profound this is. I mean, you think you guys see some eccentric people in long wingers and some short wingers, you would be really shocked at some of the guys in the eagle crowd. There's some strange, unique people, but the long and short of it is it drew oxygen away from what we were trying to accomplish on a permanent and legal and proper basis, if that makes sense to you. And also falconers that go into the trapping area and don't dot I's and cross T's, knowing there were guys and gals that were going to try to come behind them and go cowboying and catch a bird, and the wind blows the bird downwind because they've got plastic chain on their traps, because they just thought that would be cooler and lighter to carry into the field, not knowing that they needed a 5.5 pound drag, not doing the homework to get it done correctly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
and indirectly spitting in the face of people like Danny who've done all the legwork, all the hard work, all the begging, groveling, letter writing. You get where I'm coming from? I mean, I was very respectful of Danny when I got into it, because it didn't take a rocket scientist to see the legacy of work that he had done. And how could you go and piss on that work by playing games and cutting corners, if that makes any sense to you? I mean, to this day, we only have eagles in this country because of him. And for you to ignore that legacy with nonsense is really brutal. And so it's been painful to watch through the years. I would love to see it normalized. I would love to see people do the homework to do it properly. I would love the government to get happy about it, because we conduct ourselves in a way that's admirable and honorable, so that they haven't got anything to worry about. The APHIS employees, Danny told you about the history of APHIS. The APHIS employee that I worked with was a falconer and a great man. I mean, wonderful, an advocate of ours. So we screw him over when we play games like that, because here you got an advocate inside APHIS that's a falconer, an excellent falconer, and a wonderful human being. And whenever you play games, you put him in the limelight, in the crosshairs. So it's been problematic. But I look forward to a day where anybody coming up that's a masterclass falconer and can get the letters of recommendation and really has the game. That's a critical thing about eagles, is if you don't have the game to fly them, when you take a passage called an eagle to the panhandle of Oklahoma and you can throw up 40, 50, 60 slips in an hour, you're seeing falconry at a level that the Europeans would only long for with their imprints. And you're seeing it out of a conditioned eagle that loves it. Once an eagle realizes he's in a good situation, I mean, he pours it on. I mean, you'll never get a better hunting partner in your life than a really conditioned eagle. And that's in big game. But you can't take that bird to a place that doesn't have applicable game and try to put a round peg in a square hole, because you've sentenced him into a fate worse than death. And go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Before we get too far away from this point that you made, we had a previous guest who alluded to this, but they weren't talking about it from the rehab perspective. They were talking about it from the draw perspective. I have kind of 2 points, / questions. To your point, it seems like there's some people who just always seem to have eagles that they're not catching from the wild,
Yes.
A couple of prominent falconers that you see on social media, they always have an eagle, they always have good eagles. You think about rehab eagles, and I'm thinking eagles that are really physically compromised. That's not the type of eagle I'm talking about. I'm talking about good, really good eagles. And they're not trapping them, as far as I know. So they always seem to have there's a supply of good eagles that certain people seem to have access to. And also, previous guests, and I don't think it was on air, they had mentioned that there's certain people that always seem to get drawn to go get eagles too. That the odds seem to be in their favors. What do you guys think about that? You think that's just luck of the draw?
Danny?
Well, I wanted to one of the reasons I agreed to do this podcast, and Casey's been wonderful, is and so have you, Aaron. I wanted to. I'm out of falconry now. I won't. I'll probably never get another bird again, and it's okay. I mean, I'm fine. I had a great 50-something years with it. It's great. But I wanted to. I've never been able to. I was thinking about writing an article, documenting all this stuff to where we're talking about right now. To what are we going to do right now? But I don't know who would have published it. This is an opportunity. I'm not really. I have no hard feelings about this at all. At the end of the day, this isn't really going to be isn't going to matter. My family is the most important thing to me now, and it always has been. But your relationships with other people. But flying birds is not the most important thing in the world. But this eagle situation was such a powerful part of my life well, I worked on it solid, straight, nonstop for almost 30 years. I've been out of it for 10, 11 years now. So, but you're Aaron, say your question again about.
It was, do you think the current process is fair for,
I mean, the draw?
for everyone? The draw.
Yeah.
And I'd made the point that I'm not sure if you wanted to comment on the point that there's certain people that always seem to have really good eagles.
I think the system, the way they've got it now, is so convoluted, and it's at the whim of the Fish and Wildlife Service. USDA Wildlife Services isn't involved with it anymore. I don't know who controls the vault that has the names and to be drawn at a later date. I don't know who draws them. I don't know if they pick them and then don't like the particular person and throw it away and then draw another name. We don't know how any of that stuff's. I don't know, but I think it can change at any time. I think falconers are indentured servants to the Fish and Wildlife Service. And right now, the way it's working to trap an eagle today, I talked to a friend of mine the other day who was involved a little bit, and he says the Fish and Wildlife Service issues the trapping permit to the rancher, and the falconer goes to the rancher and gets permission, I don't know, either to trap or not. But my question is, and I hear crickets. I've asked this question several times because I remember asking it a couple of years ago. If anything happens to that eagle, if it gets injured while the falconer's trapping it, the Fish and Wildlife Service can hold the rancher liable because the rancher's name's on the depredation permit, and nobody can answer that question. And then they said, well, technically, yeah, that's true, but that, we don't know if that's going to happen. Well, Dave, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, why would you? Here's a rancher who's experiencing financial losses to eagle depredation. It's like, and then, okay, we'll let you take eagles from you, but we're going to put the permit in your name. If you hurt an eagle, some of the ramifications that nobody's talking about, the elephant in the room is some of these are grazing leases that the feds are trying to get the ranchers off of anyway. So you've got a 60 to 80-year-old grazing lease, 100-year-old grazing lease, third generation grazing lease on Bureau of Land Management land, and you've been a third generation sheep rancher, and the falconers on your property or on your lease and injures an eagle. Why in the world why would they want to hold the landowner or the rancher responsible? Because technically, would that be grounds for them to lose the grazing leases? I mean, it is. I asked them, and nobody can answer that question. I said, well, you're holding right now. That's why the Wildlife Services got out of it. I think the Wildlife Services doesn't want anything to do with it anymore because the Fish and Wildlife Service would basically just make an agent of the Fish Wildlife Services responsible for the actions. Now, I don't know. No one was held accountable for that mishap in 2008. And that really bothers me a little bit because people know who were there and they knew who were responsible, but nobody stood up to it. As long as they got their eagle, they went home, like Dave said. So I don't know. I don't have an answer. Is the draw, boy, Aaron, it seems to me the Fish and Wildlife Service is sitting pretty sweet because I don't know. Nobody's really bugging them anymore.
Hmm.
No, they're appeasing the Fish and Wildlife Service. These people are so desperate to get a couple of eagles or 6 eagles or whatever it is they have to go. The IEAA, that organization, some of the American falconers are involved in, eagle falconers. They have to go and document depredation on the sheep ranches. Wildlife Services doesn't even do it. The Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't do it. And the on-the-ground agency that's supposed to do it refuses to do it because they don't want to deal with the Fish and Wildlife Service. Now that I've been working with this for so long, I would like to be proven wrong on that. They're sending falconers out there to document depredation on ranch land. The falconers, it's like, I don't know. I have no comparison to that. It's like they're letting falconers, citizen scientists, they're calling them. And
one of the things that may be making you feel the way you feel, Aaron, what you're hearing is they give Wyoming falconers first shot. So they called me every year wanting to know if I wanted an eagle. And so that might be some of the same names being drawn that you're talking about. It's because they're living in Wyoming. That could have something to do with that. I don't know.
So we just have.
Well,
that would make some sense to me that they would have.
That's a good point. I asked someone that last year, and apparently this is the only circumstance. And they should have priority if a Wyoming resident, but I don't know if they're doing that anymore. I think everybody gets. I'll bow to Dave's because I don't know. I've heard that that's not the case anymore, but I would hope it wouldn't be. I hope it was what Dave said, but it can change so long. It's so arbitrary. There's no rules or regulations on how the depredation situation is supposed to be taken care of. That's the problem. And if they get a new administrator in Denver, they could start all over again.
You're right.
Right?
Have you guys happened to hear our fairly recent episodes with NAFA officials who said that they are transitioning their efforts towards eagles now that the peregrine take is more or less normalized?
Well,
it's not normalized yet.
I'll believe it when I see it.
we were told it was more or less a done deal. So when that's done, they claim they're going to move towards eagles.
We got
Aaron, with all due respect, I can't tell you how many times I've been told that.
Me too. Myself too.
And look, I love NAFA. I love the fact that we've got a national organization, a continent-wide organization. I think that's great. But just something happens when it comes to eagles. It is a ever-changing, ever-static dynamic, period. Mic drop, full stop. And I had the NAFA president sit at my table, my dinner table at the field meet in Garden City. It's been a dozen years ago, and say, Dave, we're going to pour a ton of money in it. We got this. We're going to win this. This is right after I called out George Allen at that NAFA meet. And he said, we're going to get take. We're going to get it normalized. There should be no reason that a master class falconer in this country can't get a golden eagle. And we're not going to stop till we get it. So if you'll be patient, we're on it. We're going to stay on it till we get it. And that was 14 years ago, whatever it was. Was nonsense. So they didn't do anything except stay hard on the peregrine issue, which I get it. More people want to fly long wings of peregrines than golden eagles. I understand you placing your dollars where you think the membership best wants them, but we got largely ignored for years, man. Largely ignored. And had it not been for Danny, we'd have never got him anyway. So
every battle we fought with this eagle thing, too, Aaron and Casey, I believe the Fish and Wildlife Service got smarter every time. So we're not dealing with the same people. I believe there was a perfect storm back in the late 80s, early 90s. I had the Game and Fish, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Game and Fish, wool growers, the governor's office, the legislature, Wyoming Wool Growers, Cattlemen's Association. Having the Game and Fish department back me 100% really helped. Being on that board for 8 years, I got to rub shoulders with some of the most powerful resource managers in the state. But those people, that environment, and I was, in 1984, I was 29. I just had my 70th birthday in December. You know what? I spent a good part of my life messing with this. And I flew all the eagles I ever wanted. I'm not complaining, but I don't know. Like Dave said, I'll believe it when I hear it, but I think it's a whole different, world now, and politically too, because I guess they're putting hundreds and hundreds of wind farms in Wyoming now, more than when I lived there, hundreds, maybe thousands. And these eagles, they're saying eagle populations are not as healthy as they would like them to be. They're kind of dying the death of 1,000 cuts. All these different factors and variables are affecting their population status and what. And I've been out of it now. I don't keep up on the information, the data, and you wonder what you can believe. But I don't think. Like Dave said, I don't know how many times I've heard that before.
Yeah, they probably were saying that.
And I'm 70 now, and I would have liked to have benefited more. I mean, it was okay, but we burned a few bridges along the way too, and I kind of regret that. Not that I wanted to, but it was just and you get thrown under the bus once in a while too,
Yeah.
You believe that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Casey and I recorded something last night, just the two of us, and we were talking about of course, the philosophy of a lot of falconers who have zero interest in flying a golden eagle because they know they're never going to move away from, whatever East Coast state, pick it. And their only interest is a red-tailed hawk, or if they live out west and all they ever want to do is fly a passage peregrine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's short-sightedness on their part, because what could be the eagle today could be the red tail tomorrow.
Yeah,
They
goshawk right now.
Yeah, exactly.
They're trying really hard now. It's a huge problem. We talked about that last night too. They're doing same exact thing like you said, where they send a couple college students out. They're doing that. They did that in PA, got it shut down. Did that in Michigan, got it shut down. Now that same group is weaseling their way into Maine, trying to get that shut down. And it's a big problem, and it's happening in front of our eyes. And who's to say that they won't do it to red tails next? Because if you look at trapping data, red tail numbers are, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, red tail numbers are down like crazy. Like astronomically down.
To clarify what Casey's saying, that this is just falconers' experiences, ridge trapping.
Well, I'm talking about sightings on ridges, documented on hawkwatch.com, all those things. If you look from like the early 2000s to now, it's insane how much lower it is, like by a significant amount. And then just look at this past trapping season. How many people had a really hard time trying to find a nice, female red tail or whatever they were looking for, or even a passage bird? It was pretty difficult this past season. And I wasn't even trapping, and I barely even saw any. I think I saw like
you just heard me crying about it.
No, I heard a couple other people crying too. And it's so who's to say that that's not next? So, put your money where your mouth is and help if you can. Write a letter. I was also advised, Aaron, we got some feedback from our one episode where we're like, oh, it's in the bag. It's in the bag. And a bunch of people DM'd me personally and the podcast, and they were like, yeah, no, it's not a done deal. They've been saying that forever. We got to start writing letters and start, get on top of this and really build momentum so that it pushes through and passes. Just because they sat with the director and spoke with him and they think it's a done deal, that doesn't mean it's a done deal.
Sure.
There's forces working against us at every turn. So we should start writing letters, emailing.
He's referring to the peregrine take.
Peregrine take. That's what I was referring to. Yeah. Yeah.
And we got Dan and Dave. We've talked in the past with NAFA representatives about breeding eagles, and I like you guys. I love passage birds. Period. Whatever. Pick the species. Passage is the way that is what I would prefer to fly. But if there's no future in wild take of eagles, then there needs to be a captive breeding program that falconers have access to.
100%. Yeah. And
it doesn't really seem like there's a will to do that either.
Yeah. That should be the easiest one out of all of them to get opened up is, why are we not allowed to breed a natural resource that you are claiming is in decline? And people already have them, and we can't put them together and breed them in chambers? That's illegal? What are you talking about? It's just counterintuitive. That's literally what it is, though.
You can breed.
They're in decline. It's a huge problem. They're in decline. Okay, so I have a tiercel, and she has a female, and we're gonna build a chamber and start a breeding project for these eagles. Nope, that's illegal. You'll go to jail. Oh, okay, that makes sense. So, sorry, Dave. Dan, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I know you can breed and buy golden and bald eagles in Europe.
Yeah,
you can breed and buy a bald eagle.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I think
different rules.
Canada and Mexico too. So
in Canada, I don't know. I didn't know about Canada.
Yeah, Canada too.
I don't know. We're kind of getting into. I don't know, Dave. I based on my experience, I don't see. I think this is an uphill battle that's just going to be going on for good. I don't see this federal agency, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They intentionally kept the administration, the take of eagles out of the wild to them. They didn't give it to the states. Wyoming would have been the premier state to do it, and that's where they're getting most of the birds. And they didn't allow it, so I don't have any. I don't know.
The other outside factors affecting that is the sheep ranching population of ranchers is dropping rapidly. It's becoming less and less a viable agricultural part of Wyoming.
That's right.
And if you look at their numbers, they're drastic. It's terrible. And the ones that are left are shed lambing. They're lambing indoors, so they don't need protection from predators because they can't get it. And there are far more predators than the golden eagle, the coyotes and wolves and bears and everything else. But it is there are so many facets to this whole dynamic, and it makes it really, really tough. Getting back to Casey's point, and Casey, I couldn't agree with you more, brother. The American falconers are terrified of the imprint eagles. There's been a guy that's been telling them for 30 years that it doesn't matter if you'll ever get nailed by your eagle. It's just a matter of when. And I used to get so sick of that. I even spoke to several state clubs out west trying to debunk him. I flew the same bird for 18 years and never got footed once. Or bit, because eagles like to bite too. But the history that they're ignoring in the U.S. is the European history. And those birds are all imprints. They're all captive raised. And they fly them in skirmish lines hooded. I mean, there'll be 10 eagles in a row. And they unhood them one at a time and catch the hare or the deer, roe deer, whatever they're flying. And then they'll hood him up after he's traded off and the next guy goes. And that kind of imprint mentality in the U.S., the American falconers have been told for so long, and Danny's right, they can be dangerous, there's no doubt. If you're an idiot and you go up and grab a jackrabbit from your eagle and rip it out of its talons, like you see some Harris hawkers in the past in the U.S., they get away with it with a pair of Buteo. if you come up and do that, they're golden. You will do it once, and after you're released from the emergency room, if it's just that minor, you won't do it again. So I get that, but you're ignoring the entire European body of work, the entire Asian body of work of hundreds of years of flying eagles, and they fly nothing but imprints. So the fact that, and I'm certainly not trying to rile against our Native American brothers. That's not my point. But we've got a large Native American breeding project in Oklahoma and SIA. But we can't, as a falconry community, breed our own eagles. It's insane. Lance Christensen ought to have a eagle building with 80 breeding pairs. And then any legitimate masterclass falconer that deserves one ought to be able to fly one. And you ought to be able to get knowledgeable about the European book on training, on how to truly handle an imprint eagle, and you ought to rock and roll on it. But no, we can't. We keep tripping over ourselves. It's ignorant.
Yeah. Not to your point. You're giving credit to the falconers in those countries, but keep in mind that an unqualified person can buy an eagle in England as well. And if they were a problem, and if they were actually hurting people, don't think for a second that England wouldn't ban them.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
So yeah,
I would love to see the accessibility they fought so hard for on the Peregrine Falcon be there for the Golden Eagle, because like I told that group in Kansas, and like Casey said tonight, if you're ignorant enough to believe that we're talking about specific species, then you're not paying attention. If they can come after that, they can come after anything else in the raptor world. And with wind farms being what they are, I had a friend of mine, the first wind farm that went in the panhandle of Oklahoma, I had a buddy of mine that worked at one of the generators, and his first thing to do at 6 a.m. in the morning was take a black trash bag out and kill and collect everything that had been killed and get it quickly to the dumpster so that the general public didn't find out what was going on in the wind farms. And he came to me one night and said, Dave, you have no idea how many golden eagles we're killing. Red-tails, Ferruginous hawks, prairie falcons, you name it. And a ton of passerines. I mean, passerines, he didn't even comment on. Meadowlarks, you name it, whatever. But those wind farms have been devastating to our wild bird populations. And so if they're able to hang their hat on declining populations, our sport has some really strong threats ahead. It really does.
We better start the captive red-tail project. So we've got this.
Well, I need you to come up to Catawba. I'll hook you up on the red-tail trapping, buddy. We're not going to leave you hanging out high and dry. We'll get you one.
All right, gentlemen. Well, I wanted to give you the opportunity to say anything else that you feel like needed to be said on this recording. You guys are welcome back anytime. We'd love to talk to you more. But as far as tonight,
I just want to thank you for your opportunity and your invitation. I hope we accomplished some of your goals that you wanted to talk about. Some of the topics we covered that you wanted.
Absolutely. And are you satisfied? You'd said you'd had an urge to get some of this out there. Do you feel like that this did it?
Well, it's fragmented naturally, but how do you wrap? 40 years of 35 years of doing this. Dave knows. I've known him for a long time now. It is what it is. We do your best, and I want to I want to encourage people to keep pressing and moving on, and like Dave said, a muscled up passage male golden eagle is the finest game hawk on the face of the planet.
I believe it.
And this is Casey. This is coming from two guys who've had the privilege of flying passage goshawks 5 weeks after trap date.
Well, it's the same bird. Tiercel golden eagle is just a really big brown goshawk. Trust me.
It's a relationship too.
It is a relationship.
They're smart. They're very smart, and I don't mean that to be anthropomorphic. I mean they're sentient. Like Dave said, if they figure it out and they know that if you think about 25, 30, 40 slips an hour of black-tailed jackrabbits to a golden eagle. They'll I had good populations of cottontails, and my male eagle caught a lot of cottontails. And that was pretty fun because I'd slope storm and they'd be out in the sagebrush, and that's what I had. I only caught a few whitetails when they were up, but and some of the times I had whitetails, I didn't have a golden eagle. I was flying a goshawk. I just didn't time it properly. So I only had one bird at a time. But it's I want to encourage people, and like you all said, there are young people coming up that would deserve to have. There are young Dave Stevens and Dan McCarrons out there. They're coming up.
You're looking at them. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I ate, breathed, and slept this stuff 24/7. For so many years. It was unbelievable. Yeah. And it was a good ride. It was a fun ride. We're not disappearing. We're not dying. But if I can ever be of any help, I'd still be willing to help.
Dan, anyway. I think you're going to catch a couple bass in your kayak, and then you're going to start getting the itch again.
Yes.
I see it. I can see it.
When he was saying that, Casey, I'm like, blah, 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 whatever. Whatever.
Yeah.
You'll be back.
Yeah.
Well, I'll hear from him in the fall. You think Pastor's red tail might work in Tennessee? What do you think? Yeah. So,
Dan, you're about 4 hours from me. Dave, I'm not.
Are you? Is that really? Oh, that's not that far.
No. Dave, you're probably an hour or two. And
less. I'm about 50 minutes.
Oh, shoot. Well, there we go.
Yeah, I told him where you live.
I think the season.
We'll go hawking. Can I come watch you guys hawk?
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, I'll show you. Yeah, we'll all. You know what we'll do? We'll get together this coming season, and we'll all fly whatever we got. I'll bring whatever goss I have. Catch some squirrels. We'll catch some rabbits. Maybe catch some ducks. And Dave alluded to a very fun way of hawking that is a little taboo. And I know he hasn't even told me this. He didn't even express anything, but I've done exactly what he's saying. And I know exactly what he's referring to, and I'm not going to out him. And that is some of the most fun that is you can possibly have on the East Coast. And I mean, as far to the coast as you can get, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Casey is so close to just saying whatever it is.
Yeah, I know. Casey, stop.
You need to have some plausible deniability.
Yeah, right.
I posted videos of what I did. Believe me, I know what I did.
There we go.
They didn't get me.
The falconry is a sport that allows you to be very creative. And I second what Dan says about the relationship with golden eagles. I was a North Carolina kid in the panhandle of Oklahoma and had never seen a sandstorm. And I looked up in front of us hawking one day, and there was a sandstorm gaining on us and only a short amount of feet away. And as I stepped forward, I stepped on a damn jackrabbit. And my eagle took off my fist and went downwind after the jackrabbit. And the kid that was with me worked on the ranch I was on and was an Oklahoman. And he said, lay down fast and shut your eyes and your mouth. And I lay down with my face in the dirt, and the sandstorm passed over me. And I stood back up just terrified because I knew I'd lost my eagle downwind in the sandstorm. So I started screaming his name and whistling and screaming his name. And coming out of the sandstorm as it left behind me was an eagle pumping as hard as he could to get out of that sandstorm. And when he landed on my fist, his face was encrusted in sand. His eyes were crusted shut. I had a water bottle in my bag, and I sprayed his face off. But I got home that night thinking, what other raptor would have tried to power out of an adverse weather situation like that to get back to a falconer? You know, and I know I know it sounds like I'm trying to personify the eagle, but you do create a heck of a relationship with the golden eagle.
Amen. And I'll end. I've got a similar story. If you got a minute, I'll tell mine.
Yeah.
I had a female golden eagle that I flew for 4 years, and I wound up releasing her back into the wild. She was a great bird. Yeah, Bree. I caught a few fox with her and calling them in. And one evening, I was calling fox in an area that I had never called before. It was on North Baxter Road, which isn't far out of Rock Springs, but I was up on a high area, and I used to turn the eagle. I learned over time. I used to do a lot of calling with rifles, and I figured, well, I would catch a fox, maybe a golden eagle would be great. And she chased them like they were food. So I cast her off, and she went across about, maybe 50 yards across the canyon. And she turned around and faced me, and I put on my collar. I had an electronic collar, and I was using a mouth call too, but I turned the electronic collar on, and I was cotton well bleeding. And I started calling, nothing's coming in, but a haggard female, another golden eagle came in. And I haven't been in this area very much, and I didn't notice her before. She must have been a resident female. I didn't have the male come in, but the female, and it started doing the undulating, aggressive stoop and standing on her tail and going up and doing this over my eagle. And after the second or third time, my eagle left the cliff and came straight for me. And she's pumping, and the wild eagle came in and came around back of her, right on her tail, coming right towards her. And my eagle came and got pretty close to me on the side, and I stood up and went like this, and the wild eagle just came in and put the brakes on like this, didn't know I was there. I had camo on, and split. And my eagle came and landed 3 feet beside me, turned around and watched that eagle fly out of sight.
Wow.
What
was smart enough to know that it wasn't going to
me for support.
You.
Yeah, she was.
Of course she did.
Of course she did. That was, it was like, it just blew me away. I remember that. And she goes, yeah, okay. Mess with the Tiercel. Mess with Dan. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I've heard of Marlins doing stuff like that.
Excuse me?
I said I've heard like stories of like micros doing stuff like that, where a coop's come in and like a kestrel or a Merlin will like come flying back to the falconer and like try to like get around the falconer's feet because they know that like still like little stuff like that. But with an eagle, yeah, I mean, I've only met a couple eagles, had the pleasure of meeting a couple of them, and you look into their eyes, it's like looking into like a dog's eyes or something.
Great time.
Behind them.
Yes.
They're looking at you. They're looking at you in a completely different way.
Way to rain on the story by roping in kestrels.
Sorry, yeah. I'm just taking the whole thing down. Sorry.
No. Well,
all right, gentlemen. I want to thank you guys for not only coming on, but I want to thank you guys for what you've done for falconry.
Yes. Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you, guys. That's kind. Thank you.
Thanks for having us on. Thanks for the invitation.
Of course.
Yeah, it was an honor, Danny. Good seeing you, brother.
Thank you. You too. Hey, let's keep in touch, everyone, huh?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh no, we're hawking this year. We're gonna get together.
I would enjoy that, Casey. Say the word. We'll be there.